Ellis B. Feaster's Radio Air Check and Classic TV channel.
Okay, good morning. I am Chad Lopez, president of 77 WABC. On behalf of John, Margo, and the Catsimatidis family, our WABC family, it is with profound sadness that I must share this news with you. Bernard McGuirk, husband, father, and our friend, passed away yesterday, October 4th, in the company of his family. Bernie courageously battled cancer for all to see and hear, in a manner that was inspiring to all of us. He graduated the College of Mount St. Vincent in the Riverdale section of the Bronx and later went on to marry his beloved Carol and have 2 children, Brendan and Melanie. Bernie loved radio and shared his life with the listeners of New York City since 1986, when he joined the many voices of New York City's airwaves. He entertained millions across the country, working with Imus in the morning, making you laugh one moment and making you think the next. He developed characters as the Cardinal and was a part of history, creating legendary moments on both radio and TV. In 2007, Bernie came with Imus to broadcast here at WABC. His personality from day one dramatically improved the camaraderie and morale of the entire radio station. His comedy, impressive. His professionalism, immeasurable. His character, without peer. In 2018, when it came time for Bernie and Sid to be WABC's morning show, Bernie once again succeeded and just this year has become the #1 radio New York morning show in New York City. He will be missed by all that knew him and listened to him. A true gentleman. He is the fabric of the morning show. He is the morning show and was the backbone of this entire radio station. Our thoughts and prayers are with the McGuirk family, and Tuesday we will have a tribute show honoring the life of Bernard McGuirk. But for now, we will take a moment of silence as we honor our colleague, our friend, and one of the most gifted radio personalities of all time, Bernard McGuirk.
'77 WABC remembers our colleague, our friend, radio legend, Bernard McGuirk.
Good morning, God bless.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Lord, pray the I-Man's next ranch accident permanently keeps him from talking, and that he returns to New York in the condition of Stephen Hawking, BG.
Lord, hear our prayer.
President Trump, welcome to the brand new Bernie and Sid in the Morning Show on WABC.
Bernard has been a friend of mine for so long, and Sid, you too, but I've known Bernard for, we don't want to say how long, right, Bernard?
No, it's been a while.
I loved you. Are you nuts? Well, you said love. Now it's in the past tense, so...
No, I still do.
Working with me for 4 years, you don't hate me at this point?
On certain days. Not every day, but this morning I don't hate you at all.
Please join us on Tuesday morning as we will have a special tribute show honoring the life of our colleague, our friend, Bernard McGuirk.
I was born and raised down in Alabama on a farm way back up in the woods.
Sitting here this morning, having heard late last night of the passing of our colleague, Bernard McGuirk, yours truly, Curtis Sliwa, Frank Morano, obviously Chad Lopez, our president of Red Apple Media. Sid Rosenberg, when informed, obviously just traumatized by knowing that his partner will no longer be here on this plane, this earth, or broadcasting here at WABC. And having had many partners in my lifetime on radio, you end up spending more time with your partner on radio at times than you do with your family or your wife or your closest friends. So it's been devastating for Sid and his family. And Chad and John and Margo, thank you very much for putting aside an entire day on Tuesday for all those who grew up listening to Bernard McGuirk on the radio, first with the Amish show, then with his own show with Bernie. And those who have contributed to that great show all through the years who will come in and will memorialize him and commemorate him. But remember, being Irish, it's like an Irish wake. Any of you who've ever gone to an Irish wake know that it's not just the mourning that takes place, but you remember all the good times. And one thing about Bernard McGuirk, even in the worst of times, he always had that smile on his face. He was always trying to uplift the personnel around WABC, both of his own morning team and the others that worked with him on a regular basis. He will dearly be missed. But there are so many memories. We'll touch on some of them this morning, and then obviously on Tuesday, an entire day of commemoration. One thing I can tell you is having been a prostate cancer survivor, I remember when Bernie came in to the studio where I was preparing for a show, and it's a conversation that no man ever looks forward to. I know I didn't want to have that conversation, and I know he wasn't looking forward to it. But he knew the serious condition he was in just by the symptoms that he was having. And actually, I encouraged him to seek the best medical care he possibly could, and he did. But it was a combination of many factors, as people know. Sid was able to relate to the audience from time to time, as we all knew it. He not only had a struggle with the prostate cancer and it spreading as it metastasized, the constant chemotherapy, which as many people listening now, they've had it or they've seen relatives or friends go through it. It's very debilitating. But then also he was hit with an appendicitis attack, which I experienced as a child. Boy, that could kill you in and of itself. And then pneumonia that set in, which totally depletes your immune system. So know that Bernie was fighting every second of the way, one of the toughest guys you'd ever want to know, but one of the most sensitive guys and one of the most book-read, well-informed persons who've ever graced the microphones, both on television and radio. It was amazing to see a young man who came out of the projects, a white guy from the Monroe Projects in the heart of the South Bronx, grew up with predominantly black and Hispanics, was a proud graduate of Cardinal Hayes. He was a Hayesman, who then ended up driving a livery cab in Yonkers in the roughest areas, Getty Square, Schlovine Products, Mumford Gardens. This guy was street smart, but so adept, so intelligent, so worldly, and so doggone funny that I know for many of you listening who grew up with Bernard McGuirk on the radio, first with Imus and then with Sid on their own show, you know that he uplifted spirits so many times when you were having a bad day or you were on your way to work or you had a family problem, and then all of a sudden you would hear Bernard McGuirk and smiles would come on her face. He really knew how to light up a studio, light up the 50,000 powerful watts of sound, and most importantly, light up all of us as his colleagues.
The one thing that Chad said that I think really hit the nail on the head, to your point, Curtis, is that he really was such an extraordinary blend on air of being, at one moment, the funniest person you've ever heard, doing impersonations of the Cardinal, Mayor Nagin, Andrew Cuomo, and then at the next moment, he would come out with some obscure political analysis that, an Ivy League political science professor would be lucky to come up with, let alone as quickly as Bernie did. He was preparing constantly. I'd get emails from him at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I would say, why are you awake right now? And he'd say, I'm preparing for the radio shows. A guy that took his job very seriously. But, more than anything else, he was really just an incredible guy. I met him when he first came here in December of 2007, and I was producing your show at the time, Curtis, the Curtis and Kuby show. And, I was a lot younger at the time as everybody was. And because he was replacing our show and basically replacing me as the producer of the new morning show, I decided I wasn't going to be friends with these guys. I didn't want to like these guys. That lasted all of one day because he was just so nice, so kind, so understanding. And when he was off air, he was chock full of as much wisdom as he was on air. And I was just telling my wife the other day, one of the things that he said to me recently that really I found so true, he said, you'll find out one day, Frank, you're only as happy as your unhappiest kid. And he was more than anything a family guy that I'm so glad that he was able to stick around and be healthy for his son's wedding, because I know how much that meant to him. And whenever people would talk to him, as you know how radio the business is, are you going to resign? Are they going to cut your salary? Are you going to do this? He said, if it all ends tomorrow, I'm just fine, and I'm happy. The family's taken care of. My kids' college bills are paid. House is paid off, and I have nothing else to worry about. And he's a guy that had his head screwed on straight. He didn't get caught up in, as he would say, mama drama in the halls of the radio station. Was never really a gossip or anything like that. Did his job, went home, spent time with his family, read, watched a lot of old movies. A real incredible guy, an incredible intellect, an incredible sense of humor, and a guy that I was lucky to know and work with. I think we all were.
And I think the greatest thing you could say about Bernard McGuire in terms of his radio career, because he had so many other facets to his career, is that he produced the program for the listener, not for himself. I'm sure there are many things in many different directions that he wanted to go that were of interest to him. But his concern was always first and foremost the listeners, because they were a part of his family. People got to know him personally, intimately. That's the most important thing of this thing of ours, talk radio, is you got to know Bernard McGuire. You got to know his family. You got to know his father, the bus driver. You got to know him visiting his father up in the Irish Alps, the Catskills, the arguments they had, the good times they had, growing up in the projects, going to Cardinal Hayes High School. He revealed all of that. A lot of talk show hosts and hostesses, you don't really know anything about them. They're an enigma. They're good at what they do. But with Bernard, he shared everything with the audience. And the audience, as a result, shared so much with Bernard, first on the Imus show, and then obviously eventually when he was teamed up with Sid Rosenberg. And that was the perfect match. As you know, Chad,
yeah.
There were many of us here who came into your office and said, Chad, you've got to pair these two guys up. They were bonded on the Imus show. This will help save WABC. Mm-hmm. And it was the best decision, Chad, you ever made. First to have them mid-mornings, and then when Imus was no longer capable of continuing, just smoothly having them segue in, because the audience was used to all of them on the Imus in the morning show. And so accepting Bernard McGuire and Sid Rosenberg was so easy for them. And they didn't miss a beat. They didn't miss a beat, and in many respects, Bernard helped elevate the show, because things he couldn't do with Imus, he was prevented from doing. He couldn't do. He was in a box as a producer, as a contributor. Now he had the freedom to do it with Sid, because they were like the yin and the yang. They couldn't have been any two people with more diverse of a personality than Sid Rosenberg, the extrovert, and in many ways, Bernard McGuire was the introvert. I mean, it was like the perfect yin and yang, one of the greatest combinations to ever exist in all of talk radio. And I've been listening to talk radio since I was 12 years old, and I'm 68 now. And that covers a lot of talk radio real estate.
You know, Curtis and Frank, as you guys are going through this, and, I'm sitting back and I'm thinking about those days where we put them together, and just what Bernie brought every morning to the hallways of 2 Penn Plaza, right? When he would walk in, and and I witnessed this over the past couple of months, just this yesterday, this week, recently, just how courageous and his strength, and that last weekend, I spoke with him, and I called him and his wife Carol. We were talking, and it was Bernie. It was Bernie. It was as if Bernie was sitting here. He picked me up. I said, Bernie, I'm not calling you to pick me up. I want to see how you're doing. How's everything? He's like, oh, come on, Chad. Are you kidding me? He's like, I'm sitting back here, and and I'm reading my books, and I'm doing it, and I said, Bernie, how you doing? He goes, I miss you guys. He goes, I miss coming into the studio. I miss Sid. I just miss my family. He goes, I'm with my family here, but that's my family. And he goes, most importantly, I miss my extended family, the listeners.
Yes.
He goes, they kept me coming in the morning. And when we got together with Sid, and he did, he said, I give it. He goes, I learned a lot from everyone. He goes, but most importantly, what I learned was from the listeners.
The other thing with Bernie, when you work so long with a larger than life personality like Imus was, and you're in some ways kind of always in Imus's shadow, there would be a lot of a tendency for a weaker willed person or somebody that didn't have the kind of independence and freedom and self confidence that Bernie did to do whatever Imus said. But Bernie, he on more than one occasion exercised the independence to use his own judgment. I remember during the interregnum between when they were on the fan and when he came here, Bernie had an opportunity to go on Fox News on Hannity and Combs, and Imus didn't want him to do it. He said, look, I don't want you to do this, and it's not going to be helpful to what we're trying to do. And Bernie told Imus, who at that point Bernie's career was inexorably tied to, Bernie told Imus no. And a lot of people wouldn't do that. Yeah. And I don't know that I would do that if I was in the kind of position that he was in. And he said, no, I've thought about this, spoken with a lot of people I trust and my family, and I think this is the best thing to do for me right now. And he was right. And Imus even acknowledged that he was right after seeing him on TV.
Another great example of courage and strength.
Absolutely.
But when we return, again, if you're just tuning in now, late last night, Bernard McGuire passed away. His family was with him at that time. We were all informed before the clock struck midnight. And so we put together a show this morning to honor the legend, the time, the person who was more than just a radio figure, but a friend, a member of our WABC family, Bernard McGuire. When we come back, I'd like to give a little insight into Bernard McGuire, how important he was to the Imus in the Morning show, because you would hear the show, and many of our listeners now, they grew up listening to Imus in the Morning with Bernie McGuirk and Sid and all the other contributors. They don't realize how integral Bernard McGuirk was to keeping that show together, that at times was a scene out of Mutiny on the Bounty. That's all I'll describe it as. It was like a scene out of Mutiny on the Bounty, and it was Bernard McGuire who really kept it all together on this day of commemoration. Remember, coming up on Tuesday, a full day in which we will memorialize the life and times of Bernard McGuire, our colleague, our friend, a member of your extended family of all the WABC listeners out there.
We are back with Bernard McGuire's favorite Spotify list, right? His
I missed one of the things he always did was the 5 favorite songs, and because Bernie, he would play his 5 favorites so often, Imus made him add 5 more. So and he maintained a great Spotify list. He had a great ear for music, great passion for music.
I've had many gold diggers in my life, so that song sort of took me on a time machine. But speaking of time machine, we're on that this morning. Chad, you reported, as you reported to all of us last night, the passing of our colleague, our friend, Bernard McGuire, late last night with his family. He's no longer here. He's gone up to that radio place high in the sky, and he certainly earned that many times over. So it's a day in which we put together a group to speak to all of you, because when Sid obviously was informed, who has been his partner through thick and thin, both with Imus in the Morning, and then obviously when they earned the right to become the morning show here at WABC and the #1 news talk station here in the tri-state area. He's traumatized, as is his family. But the station is going to put together a full day of a tribute to a radio iconic figure, Bernard McGuire. That'll be on Tuesday. So not only in the morning show, but through every show throughout the day, People will be coming on who grew up with Imus, who are listeners of Imus, contributors to Imus, advertisers for Imus in the morning, and then Bernard McGuirk and Sid Rosenberg. And everyone will have an opportunity to reminisce and tell all the things they remember about Bernard, who not only had a life on radio, a life on television, but a life as a family guy that many others only aspire to have. So much time that he would spend with his family, quality time, and yet he'd bring his best each and every morning to the microphones here at WABC.
Yeah, and like you, Curtis, he really had such an incredible blend of street smart, the comedic sense of how to entertain, and genuine intellectual depth. And it's those three things don't come along in that kind of package too often. But, the people that only knew Bernie from the radio, they could probably tell, what his family meant to him. But for those of us that saw him on a daily basis, saw what his children and his father, who had a very tough illness as well, that Bernie worked with him on and coached him through, what they meant to him. I remember it was one instance about 14 years ago where the Jonas Brothers were performing here at the radio station, and Bernie's daughter was a huge fan of the Jonas Brothers. And that was probably the only time that he was the producer of the Imus in the Morning show, those 4 hours where he didn't pay any attention to the Imus in the Morning show, because his whole mission that whole morning was finding a way to get his daughter into the Jonas Brothers impromptu concert in the conference room. He, told his daughter, you want to come, we'll try and get you in, no promises. And sure enough, he found a way to get her in. And, that was his big victory that day. It had nothing to do with the radio show that hundreds of thousands of people heard. It was all about getting his daughter to see this band that she really enjoyed.
Well, when we come back, a tribute that was made to Bernard McGuirk, I shared with him. I took a video when I was running for mayor. I was in where he was born, the Monroe Housing Projects, heart of the South Bronx. And the brothers and sisters there, some of them who remember Bernard, called him the Great White Hope. And he certainly was for them, because escaping out of the projects, no matter who you were, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, was a very, very difficult thing to do in the South Bronx. And, boy, everybody in the projects there, in Monroe Projects, know that Bernard McGuirk. Yeah, this is the apartment. This is the building he grew up in. Just a real success story. But right now, let's That's right. Late last night. Unfortunately, Bernard, after battling prostate cancer and having an appendicitis attack and then having pneumonia, was no longer able to hold on, and in front of his family, passed into the radio hereafter. And the iconic figure that he is, we're recognizing all of his contributions and the great individual he was as a human being first and foremost, and then as a radio and TV host. And to let everybody know who has followed Bernard McGuirk and Sid Rosenberg, Sid was informed, and actually he and his family totally traumatized, because having had partners in radio, you spend more time with them in a normal week than you would even your wife or your family members. So the loss of a valued partner is devastating. Sid will be rejoining all of us once he's able to absorb all of this and get back on track. But to the station, we'll be doing an entire commemoration on Tuesday, in which we'll relive the complete life and times and contributions of Bernard McGuirk. We'll have a number of guests on who were both with him in Imus in the Morning, and obviously with his own show with Sid. And the many callers will have an opportunity to contribute. It's a full day that he rightfully deserves. So today we're on the time machine. As I heard Justin Ellick give the Sid Rosenberg sports update, it reminded me how often I would just deep six Bernie, lifelong Met fan. And after the Mets lost 3 in a row to Atlanta, and I was talking about how Jimmy Carter, who has survived us all at 98, the weekend, he had his birthday, they had a parade through Plains, Georgia with his wife, Rosalind, who was 95. He was wearing the Atlanta Braves cap. He was doing his chop that he did many, many years when Ted Turner owned the Atlanta Braves. And they say, well, what's your best gift on your birthday? He goes, the Atlanta Braves sweeping the Mets in 3. And even Elton John in the middle of a concert in Nashville. Who thought that Elton John was an Atlanta Braves fan? Stopped the concert while playing the piano, got up and said, I just heard that the Atlanta Braves swept the New York Mets. This is my best day. And I said to myself, I would have been all over Bernie as I would have been all over Sid. And obviously you, Frank, lifelong Met fans. That's part of the camaraderie we had here at WABC.
By the way, in addition to the terrific tribute show on Tuesday, we're going to hear from Bill O'Reilly a little bit later, somebody that was not only a fan of Bernie on the radio, but recognized Bernie's ability as a TV presenter. When he had the O'Reilly Factory, he put Bernie on every week because he recognized how compelling Bernie was. And obviously, when O'Reilly first started doing these radio hits on the Bernie and Sid show, he wasn't doing them on many shows. It was really only because of that depth of the relationship and the respect that he had for Bernie.
Yeah, they were very fond of each other.
Absolutely.
And had a tremendous respect for each other. And Bill would always say that about Bernie.
No doubt about it. And you talk about the amount of time radio partners spend with one another. Unlike a lot of your radio partners, Curtis, Bernie and Sid actually seem to genuinely like one another.
That's true. That's true. They fought for one another. When it came time to replace Imus, as he was deteriorating himself physically, with the lung issues, he was down at the ranch. He was no longer able to broadcast in the manner that he had for so many years. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the person behind Imus, who kept that show going single-handedly, was Bernard McGuire. Yeah. When they came over to WABC, I would sometimes go in the control room, and during a break, Imus was like the Wizard of Oz. All of a sudden, he was funny. He was cogent. He was making small talk with the members on air. And then all of a sudden, a blast furnace. I mean, vitriol, screaming, hollering, yelling. Naturally, everyone was super intimidated. And there was Bernie. He was like the master controller at NASA, having to be cool, calm, and collected, keeping everybody on focus. And then feeding Imus information, cajoling him, calming him down, getting him back on track. Towards the end of Imus's career, he was suffering from a little bit of dementia, where he would sort of lose his thought. Bernie would talk to him, would calm him down, would get him back on track, would give him some of the key lines to get him back on track. A lot of people don't realize that, that it was really Bernard McGuire that was the anchor of that show. And I'll never forget, I was invited on to the Howard Stern show. And I was told by Cumulus, our parent company at the time, you go on that Howard Stern show, you talk about Imus in the morning, and you're fired. And so what I did is I used my time to talk about how important Bernard McGuire was. And Bernard never forgot that, because he never really got his due in terms of all the things he did behind the scenes. He was the producer. He lined up the guests. He had to assuage the other talent. He had to bring everything together, because Imus at times would be like the guy who would break up, would just break everything up. It's almost like he got joy at times, pitting people against one another, and Bernie would have to put all the pieces together.
I remember, I'm sorry, Frank, one second here. I remember specifically a few times walking down 2 Penn on the 17th floor over there, and when Imus would have that blow up, and, Bernie would be there. He'd have all his newspaper articles in front of him. He'd have everything. He was well prepared. But you're absolutely right. He was the Rock. He'd take his glasses off when Imus was blowing up, and he'd put it on top of his head, and he'd look at everybody, and he'd say, let's go. He was really good at it.
Because it could have been Mutiny on the Bounty.
Yes,
it could have been at times that some of his key participants were just ready to jump ship.
Right.
And Bernie would say, look, Imus, we're all here together. We're all here to guide this ship straight. Let's remain cool, calm, and collected. Without Bernie there, That show would have just broken up into 100 parts.
A couple of things. One, that Howard Stern show appearance that you did in 2010, I was working with you back then, and just so we're besmirching the right radio companies, that was actually Citadel that made that threat to fire you, not Cumulus. So Cumulus can call up their lawyers. But Bernie was the first person to email you after that appearance because he really did appreciate getting the recognition. And to the point of what you're both saying about the kind of work that he did on the Imus show behind the scenes, it's difficult for someone that's a born performer and as creative and as humorous as Bernie was to be able to take a back seat. But he didn't hesitate to do that at all. He was a team player. He did what was best for the show. All of Imus's best lines were written by Bernie. Whenever Imus asked an intelligent question to a guest, it was written by Bernie. Yeah. And Bernie had no problem at letting Imus get the credit for that.
Oh, yeah. Bernie would read the book. And then Imus would ask the question based on Bernie having read the book, and it made it appear as if Imus was the most well-read person in the world. And Imus would not ever defer to Bernie, would never say, like, thank you, would never compliment it. It was a very, very difficult relationship, and I got to tell you, that probably took years off of his radio life because he had to suck it up. For the good of the show, he had to suck it up. Very difficult to do.
He was really, everyone knows that he was conservative, but he was really an independent thinker and an independent voice. I think a lot of you guys remember the run-up to the war in Iraq. And at the time, the only people on the right that were willing to be critical of the war in Iraq, it was like Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan, and that was it. Bernie McGuirk actually went on television. He went on CNN and explained as a conservative why that was not the right thing to do. Now, you could agree with him, you could disagree with him, but I think it took a lot of onions to actually, as a conservative, knowing your base is kind of going the other way, to go out there and be so outspoken on an issue that most Republicans didn't agree with him.
And he was right. Turned out he was absolutely right. So he walked the gangplank. Could have ended up causing him a career because at that time you were considered to be unpatriotic, un-American, jumping ship. Sure. And yet he stood to his principles through thick and thin, and that's what Bernard McGuirk always was. The other thing I had mentioned, going up to the projects where he was born and raised, the Monroe housing projects, there's three kind of projects. There's the good projects, there's the projects that are half and half, and there are the projects that are very tough. He grew up in a very tough environment in the South Bronx, the Monroe housing projects. When I was running for mayor, I had an opportunity to stop by there. And as I was meeting and greeting a lot of the people, they all remembered Bernie. They pointed out the apartment that the McGuirk family grew up in, their memories of Bernard McGuirk. Imagine being a white guy in the projects, surrounded by a lot of blacks that he lived with, obviously Hispanics. And then years later, he gets tarred and feathered as a racist by people who never lived with black or Hispanic people. For him, it had to have been the most difficult situation, what transpired with Rutgers and the Scarlet Knights. A man who grew up with blacks and Hispanics, and you have these other whites calling him a racist, and it's sort of like, are you kidding? Do you understand where I grew up in the hood? I survived with black and Hispanic people under the most dire circumstances, poor and impoverished people. I went to school with black and Hispanics. And I'll never forget the hurt that he carried with that until they were finally able to get back on track and be hired at WABC.
I'm sure you're right. But the thing with Bernie is if he was hurting, if he was stressed, if he was anxious about anything, obviously that's a world-class thing. He never showed it. He always acted cool, calm, and collected. I remember the second day that Imus was on this station, there was one technical problem after another. They were off the air at some point, and the whole station, the whole floor was running around like chickens without heads. And I said to Bernie, who I've learned a great deal from, I said to Bernie, what's the matter with you? How can you be so calm? And he said, at the end of the day, Frank, we're not digging ditches. We're not doing brain surgery.
Anyway, right now, John Catsimatidis, our owner-operator, is on the line. Good morning, John.
Well, it's not a good morning, Curtis, and it's a very sad morning. And I was told about it last night about 8 o'clock, and it was just, I knew there was something wrong because I would go to church every Sunday and I would light candles. And I would light a candle for Bernie. And last Sunday, I lit a candle, and I would send it to Bernie by texting him. And for the first time, I did not get an answer back. And I had a gulp in my stomach, and there's no other way to say it. It's just you guys worked with Bernie for a long, long time, and you know him much more than I knew him. I actually first time met him when we bought the station on March 1, 2020, and he was a great guy. He said it the way it was. He just, people respected him because he would say it the way it was, the way he felt, without mincing any words. And he has been missed for the last few months and will be missed. But, in his memory, we have tapes of Bernie going back many, 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 many years, and maybe we'll broadcast some once in a while in his memory, and that way, if you're able to listen to him on those tapes, he'll never ever be forgotten, and those are the memories.
John, this is Chad. I want you to know one thing, that when I spoke with Bernie last week, one of the things and it's really important for this audience and for you and Margo and the Catsimatidis family to know. Bernie said, "You know what, Chad? I am so happy. I haven't been happy. We went through with Citadel, Cumulus, and and all the trials and tribulations that Bernie went through. But he said, I found the place, and I'm happy what John has done for this and what we can do. And I felt that when he said, what you've given him and the environment that you've created for him to do what he did, he truly, and you can tell. I think you guys, we were talking about it earlier. You can feel that when he came in, Bernie was a different Bernie here than when he was over at Cumulus and Citadel.
No doubt about it.
Thank you for that, John, and what you did for him.
And John, I think you'd agree that as an entertainer, as a news analyst, and as a person, he was simply just irreplaceable.
You're right. He's irreplaceable. And it's with great sadness. Last night I was having dinner with the Archbishop of America, the Greek Orthodox Church, and as a guest we had the Patriarch and the Pope of Africa, and a lot of other officials. And I made the announcement when Chad called me. And this morning at 9:00, I'm supposed to be at with the Patriarch of Africa at the Cardinal's home at 9:00, and I think it's appropriate WABC or the family or combination we do sometime in the future. It's up to his wife Carol too. A special tribute at St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Yes.
For Bernie, and I think that would be appropriate. We're all his fans, and all his friends could come to St. Patrick's and have memories of Bernie, memories that we'll never forget.
Yes, John, that would be a wonderful thing for especially all of our listeners who want to pay tribute to Bernard McGuire, who, as you were informed, we were all informed last night, passed into the hereafter. It's good to know that after all of his trials and tribulations in radio and television, he had a home away from home that you and Margo provided here at WABC. As Chad said, he finally got to be the Bernard McGuire that he was not permitted to be for many, many years, John. And thank you. Thank you on behalf of Bernard McGuire, his family, Sid Rosenberg, for letting us all enjoy the real Bernard McGuire in the final years of his life. We'll continue to pay tribute to Bernard McGuire, his passing last night, and take you all back on the time machine right here on his place to be, WABC.
She said, you're a liar. I said, I got it going on, baby doll, and I'm on fire.
Good morning. I'm Chad Lopez, president of 77 WABC. On behalf of John, Margo, and the Catsimatidis family and our WABC family, it is with profound sadness that I must share this news with you. Bernard McGuire, husband, father, and our friend passed away yesterday, October 4th, in the company of his family. Bernie courageously battled cancer for all to see and hear, in a manner that was inspiring to all of us. He graduated the College of Mount St. Vincent in Riverdale section of Bronx, and later went on to marry his beloved Carol and have 2 children, Brendan and Melanie. Bernie loved radio and shared his life with the listeners of New York City since 1986, when he joined the many voices on New York City's airwaves. He entertained millions across the country, working with Imus in the morning, making you laugh one moment and making you think the next. He developed characters as the Cardinal and was a part of history, creating legendary moments on both radio and TV. In 2007, Bernie came with Imus to broadcast here at WABC. His personality from day one dramatically improved the camaraderie and morale of the entire radio station. His comedy, impressive. His professionalism, immeasurable. His character, without peer. In 2018, when it came time for Bernie and Sid to be WABC's morning show, Bernie once again succeeded and just this year has become the #1 radio news talk morning show in New York City. He will be missed by all that knew him and listened to him. A true gentleman. He is the fabric of the morning show. He is the morning show and was the backbone of this entire radio station. Our thoughts and prayers are with the McGuirk family, and Tuesday we will have a tribute show honoring the life of Bernard McGuire. But for now, we will take a moment of silence. We honor our colleague, our friend, and one of the most gifted radio personalities of all time, Bernard McGuire.
WABC remembers our colleague, our friend, radio legend, Bernard McGuire.
Good morning, God bless. Lord, hear our prayer. Lord, we pray the I-man's next ranch accident permanently keeps him from talking, and that he returns to New York in the condition of Stephen Hawking, BG. Lord, hear our prayer. No. President Trump, welcome to the brand new Bernie and Sid in the Morning Show on WABC.
Bernard has been a friend of mine for so long, and Sid, you too, but I've known Bernard for, we don't want to say how long, right, Bernard?
No, it's been a while. I loved you. Are you nuts? Well, you said love. Now it's in the past tense, so... No, I still do. Working with me for 4 years, you don't hate me at this point?
On certain days. Not every day, but this morning I don't hate you at all.
Please join us on Tuesday morning as we will have a special tribute show honoring the life of our colleague, our friend, Bernard McGuire.
And Sid Rosenberg was informed, like we all were last night, of the passing of his very dear friend and colleague in radio, Bernard McGuire. He and his family very traumatized. He will be returning, and obviously will join the commemoration and the memorialization of one of the greatest radio and TV contributors of all time. But right now, on the line, a man synonymous with Imus in the morning, and obviously Bernard McGuirk and Sid Rosenberg as they carried the torch. A lifelong friend of Bernard, a guy who knows him as well as anybody, Bo Dietl. Sorry for your loss, Bo.
Okay. Let me just hold it together. I got to do this last night. I'm going to be a man about this, but it's part of my family. He was like my son. He was like my brother. When he was going through, I met Bernie back in 1986 when Imus had a problem with his daughters, and I came into the station. Soupy Sales was there, and I met Bernie then, and we really hit it off. And Charles McCord, and it was just one of the greatest crews entertainers. Rob Bartlett. I mean, you just didn't have a better crew than the Imus in the Morning show was not Imus in the Morning. What it was Bernard McGuirk, Charles McCord, and it was just a great family. And I used to do it sometimes 3-4 days a week. I had Joey Pots and Pans come there. We went to the movies. He hated Joey back and forth. But I'm focused on one thing. I'm focused on a man that was so smart, Bernard McGuirk. I'm focused on a man who was a true friend. And towards when he got sick, a lot of people don't know, I would be texting him, and sometimes he would pick up the phone. Sometimes he wouldn't pick up the phone. And, I mean, I'd just like to read one of the last texts before I went away to Italy for 10 days in Greece. And before I left, I was so worried about, because he had not returned a text of mine, and he just said to me, you know, I said to him every day, I'm praying for you, Bernie, and he says, love you, Bo. I'm in the best hands because of you and Carol. And then he came back, and he wrote, this is only the last text. This is the last text that I got from Bernie a couple of weeks ago. Love you, Big Bo. Setbacks happened, but I'm kicking this, I don't know if I can word shizzle's ass, ready to get back in normal. I'm getting back in normal in many ways. You are a great man, Bo, and I'm honored to call you one of my greatest friends. And again, I would be in contact with him. And here's another one just the same day. Love you, Bo. Hanging in there. Speak soon. Can't talk right now. A lot of people don't know the kind of pain and sickness that this man was going through when he was doing that show from his home. And what he was going through, this was a true gallant hero. You know, you like to throw the word hero around. Bernard McGuirk was a hero. He looked in the face of this horrible cancer, and I just can't believe people today are dying from cancer. They've been dying my whole life, and this is one of the closest people that I loved in my life. He's a family. I called Cardinal Dolan, who loved Bernie. Cardinal Dolan, he was so happy when Cardinal Dolan reached out to him and was saying prayers, and we were all there. We were all there. Everybody was praying. Every one of my friends was praying, and I'm sorry to be such a mush, but you just don't lose somebody that you love so much and not have emotion. And I'm sorry for that. But again, going back to the days with Bernard McGuirk, all these things that you heard on the radio making Imus look so good, well, that was majority was Bernard McGuirk and Charles McCord made Imus who he was. And, you know, I was there. I know Bernie for 38 years. And I love this man, like I said, like a son and a brother. Then when the mishap happened with the Rutgers thing, all of a sudden Imus was ready to throw him into the garbage can, and Imus was all screwed up. And, of course, the blame game goes, Bernard McGuirk only said what Don Imus wanted him to say, and then he took all the weight. And Bernie, like the true man that he was, took all the weight. I'll never forget, I sat down with Roger Ailes. This is when he got thrown off the TV, and Imus was there, and me and Roger Ailes in his private dining room at Fox. And then all of a sudden, Imus says to Roger Ailes, I'm going to get rid of Bernard McGuirk. I stood up. I put my finger in his face, and I said, Don, I'll never do your damn show again. How dare you throw Bernie under the bus? He is you. You understand? He's one of your children, and you're ready to throw him under the bus. I will never do another show again with you, Don Imus. And then all of a sudden, Roger Ailes, the great man he was, said to Don Imus, Don, Bernie is you. He is your show. And then all of a sudden he went back in his chair and he shut his mouth, Don Imus. He was ready to throw my friend Bernie under the desk. I should have just clocked him right then and there. And I would have clocked him right then and there. And never did Don Imus' show again for Bernie, because Bernard McGuire was the most loyal, one of the smartest people I've ever met. And a lot of people don't realize he handed a lot of crap to Don Imus. He read the damn books. He told Imus about the books, and then Imus sit there like he was an intelligent soul. And the reality was, it was Bernard McGuire and Charles McCord that fed him to make him probably one of the biggest radio personalities of all time. But it wasn't. It was his pillars, his strength that he had there with Bernard McGuire and with Charles McCord. And I'm going to miss him like nobody else. I lost my brother 3 years ago, my closest friend, and this is like losing another brother. You know how it was, Curtis. You know how I felt about him.
Yes.
I'm very honored that you let me come on the radio, and I'm sorry to sob like this, but I don't know how to react.
Well, Bo, you can speak to the fact that you know a lot of street smart guys. I've known a lot of street smart guys in our lifetime. But yes. Bernie was the full package. He was an intellect, but he was a street smart guy. I've never met anybody with that kind of background that could fight you in the street, could stare fear down, and yet could then quote from some of the greatest pieces of literature that have ever been written. Never met a human being, an individual of that type.
You know, Curtis, we have a bit of, to be successful, to let people like you and all that, I think we all have a little bit of narcissism in them. You have it, Sid has it. I have a touch of it, too. I'm not going to lie about it. We all like what we do, and you're a great hero to me, Curtis. And you know, when you got shot, I was the first one to put money up for the rewards, who shot you and all that. My thing was that you're the person that's been this throughout this, pretty much almost the whole thing, Curtis, and you knew what he was. And again, people don't realize he's a guy that did it, but he never wanted to take credit for it. He never wanted to take credit for any of these great things he did. And I'd walk any street with Bernard McGuire. You know, a lot of people talk baloney. Bernard McGuire would have your back. He's not a guy that would start an argument or start a fight, but I tell you, having Bernard McGuire at my back, I could drink with him in any bar, and anybody, I would not have any fear of any 10 guys, because I would fight 10 guys with Bernie at my back. And you want to know something? Never, ever would he try to take credit for any things that he did. It was all about his service to let people be happy, let people be laugh, and in the morning, that's what he got his charges out of, entertainment. Smartness, I don't think you can compare. You know, when we started this Beat Bernie show aspect, which was great, I mean, some of the things, and this is when he was sick, Curtis, he was there, and he was just phenomenal. And then when he started to really get turned to the worst part of it, you know, his brain wasn't working that well because of the overabundance of drugs. He still fought it, and he still was on the radio. Who the heck, if somebody else would have gave up, he never would give up. And again, I think the most important thing that I heard from him, this is only a couple of weeks ago, setbacks happen, but I'm kicking this shizzle's ass already back to normal. This is only 2 weeks ago, in many ways. And you're a great man, Bo, and I'm honored to call you one of my greatest friends. But with Carol and you, and having me in your hands, I will beat this. And this was only a couple of weeks ago. And I was just so worried when I went away that I wouldn't be here when it happened. And that was one of the big things that I really didn't want to go on the trip. But again, every listener out there and everybody who loved Bernie, let's do something big. Let's do something that St. Patrick's Cathedral, I'll call the Cardinal up. We have to have some massive tribute to one of the greatest human beings I have ever met.
Yes, well, Bo, our owner-operator, John Catsimatidis, made that very point right before you came on. He's reaching out to Cardinal Dolan, a day of commemoration at St. Patrick's Cathedral for all the folks who grew up with Bernie, listened to him, watched him on TV, heard you many times on the Imus in the Morning show, and when Bernie really came to life when he had his own show with Sid. And in addition, Tuesday, our full schedule here at WABC will be put aside, and we'll do a complete tribute, yourself, others who were part and parcel of the Imus show, and then obviously who knew Bernard McGuire personally and were key in making sure that Bernard McGuire and Sid Rosenberg were permanently put together to replace Imus in the morning. So thanks for your memories. I know this is one of the most difficult days in your life, Bo. But remember, he's Irish. It's an Irish wake, Bo. You know, Italians, we don't have that. But the Irish, they keep a smiling face on.
The Irish way will continue forever, and that's how we'll remember Bernie forever. And again, I don't want to, with my friend Sid, I am sure, he's a loud fella, he's an emotional fella. I can feel what he's going, because we spoke many times leading up to this, and I love Sid. And I really, truly love Bernie so much. And Curtis, you're a great friend. You've done so much for this city. You've done so much for people. You're a wonderful, wonderful guy, too. And I'm honored to know you for so many years, too.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Bo. We'll all continue to sit shivy here. Again, Sid was informed last night, like all of us, and he and his family so traumatized. But I can only say, you remember, Chad, and Frank, at the 100th anniversary at Cipriani's, when Sid was speaking, and then he broke down. He was talking about his lifelong partner, Bernard. And the crowd there, 600 people, gave Bernard McGuire a standing ovation. And you could see how heartfelt Sid was. The tears were just rolling down his cheeks.
Yes. Yes. As a matter of fact, you know what, Justin? Let's. I have the video of that. Let's put that up on the website for everyone to see.
Yeah.
And Chad, one more thing, Chad. I love you, and thank you for being there for Bernie. Like you've been a rock to him and Carol. And thank you so much, Chad.
Thank you, Bo.
We'll continue on. It's our commemoration to the passing of one of the great iconic figures in all of radio history. Our friend, our colleague here at WABC, Bernard McGuire.
Frank Morano here with Curtis Sliwa and our president, Chad Lopez, because unfortunately, the linchpin of this radio station and a man who helped turn this into the #1 news talk show in New York City has passed away. Bernard McGuire, unfortunately, no longer with us after bravely battling cancer since December, and his partner Sid obviously overcome with emotion. There's going to be a whole special day of tributes for him on Tuesday, but we're sharing some of our own remembrances of Bernie McGuire and his contributions to radio and to the show and to our lives.
Yes,
Chad.
Yes, and I want to thank all of the listeners. I mean, the outreach and for Bernie and just the love and everything that's been coming in. Thank you. For your loyalty and your listenership. I have a special message here from the first lady of our radio station, Margo Catsimatidis. Unfortunately, she's beside herself with emotion right now and unable to speak, but wanted to offer a few thoughts on Bernie's passing and, more importantly, on his life. She wanted to share the following. Bernie was one of the most respected and revered radio personalities. He had a special gift, a special soul. He always had humility and respected those around him. His love of family shined through every day. I personally only knew him for a brief but special time. Always a smile, always a hug. We at 77 WABC were his second family. He will be deeply missed, and I know he sits at the right hand of God. May his memory be eternal. These are the words of Margo Catsimatidis. Margo, I know Bernie is smiling down, enjoying those M&Ms you sent him every morning. Thank you for being our station's mom, and thank you for all you do here at 77 WABC.
And I think, Chad and Frank, that was part of what Bernie never experienced before in radio, because he was always working for these huge corporations. At the Fan, there was always craziness going on, not only with the Imus in the Morning show, but all the personality-driven other shows. So then he comes over to WABC. They take over the morning show 2007 after being on the shelf really unfairly because of what was said about the Scarlet Knights, the female basketball team, which now when you look back at it, you say, really? They got fired for that? Bernie suffered the most, having grown up in the projects, always growing up with blacks and Hispanics. So he came over to WABC. It's Citadel, it's Cumulus. Again, another giant corporation. He never worked for a family-owned and operated radio station like this is now with John and Margo Catsimatidis, who was so intricately involved in every aspect of the radio station, and especially not only befriending those who work for them, but making them part of the extended family. So I think at first, out of everybody, Bernard McGuire, it was the most difficult for him to adapt to. He wasn't used to that. And then I would tell Bernie, I said, Bernie, this is a different experience. You are now embraced into a family where there's a real concern for who you are, what you do, and what you want to do. And they gave him the opportunity, Chad, to be Bernard McGuire. He was not permitted to be that before. He always had to be the secondary figure, limited, put in a box. He didn't like just being thought of as the guy who does the voices, the imitations. He was able to expose to the audience his wide wealth of knowledge, not only of current events, but literature, culture. And I think the teaming up with him and Sid Rosenberg was magic because it brought out the best of both of them. And you need to take credit for that because you fought for that against all odds. Because I remember I was right in the middle of that, and you made Bernie's life. I mean, he finally got to be the Bernard McGuire that he always wanted to be. And then when John and Margo saved the station, he was like in seventh heaven.
Yes. You know, thank you for that, Curtis. But I don't think I saved anyone's life, especially
Look,
Bernie.
I was in the room. You had the contract from Mike Lupica on your desk. They were pressuring you to sign it. I said, don't sign it, Chad. You got to elevate Bernard McGuire and Sid. They earned this. They earned it.
Right.
They had to live with Imus for years. They earned it.
You know, we're talking about what an incredible guy Bernie was off mic. We've spent a lot of time talking about how tough he was, how smart he was, how kind he was, what a family guy he was. He really has shown over the course of the last 10 months a remarkable amount of courage. I think we all know people who, when they get a cold, they act as if the world is about to end. I always got the sense in talking with Bernie that he didn't want anybody to feel bad for him. He didn't spend any time pitying himself. He didn't spend any time thinking, why me, why me? He said, I'm going to fight this as much as I can, and I'm going to be there not only for my family, but for the radio audience. I think he faced the last 10 months as toughly as anybody could have faced any illness.
Well, when we come back, there's a lesson to be learned with Bernard McGuire's passing for all men out there and their loved ones, especially their wives, because it's the same thing I faced, stage 4 prostate cancer. Men don't want to talk about it. Men do never want to discuss prostate cancer, sometimes until it's too late. And I'll sort of intimately bring you into a room where I sat with Bernie when he recognized it may have been too late. And let's hope his passing can save a lot of lives out there of men who are in that same mindset as I was. No, 1,000 times no. I don't want to discuss this. I don't want to discuss the prospect of it being prostate cancer. Right here on this very, very special day, with the passing of Bernard McGuire, the commemoration, the good times, the great times, and also probably the most devastating time in his life when he recognized that he had prostate cancer and it was metastasizing.
This is the Bernie and Sid Show, 746 on 77 WABC. Frank Morano here with our president, Chad Lopez, and Curtis Sliwa. We are remembering and discussing the life and legacy of Bernard McGuire. We're going to do a full tribute to Bernie on Tuesday as a radio station. Bernie bravely fighting prostate cancer for this entire year, and you'd never know it for how focused he was on the air, how funny he was at times, how insightful at other times. But Curtis, you better than anybody know the importance of making sure people deal with prostate cancer awareness and prevention. This could be a learning lesson for a lot of men out there.
Absolutely. Let me just make everyone very clear on this. Bernie McGuirk knew he was in trouble. And he came in and he sat with me in the studio. He closed the door, and I knew what it was. I could see he was gaunt. He was looking the same way I did when I was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, except he had waited too long. And he described to me some of the symptoms, and since I had become very expert on this, having dealt with men with prostate cancer or the fear of prostate cancer, I knew it probably had metastasized. And then Bernie went for the biopsy. It didn't work out as he had hoped. And then, boy, he had a struggle. He had to have the chemotherapy to stop the spread of cancer. And understand this, while all of that was going on, he had an appendicitis attack. His appendix exploded. I went through that when I was a child. That normally kills people. So he had to survive that. And then the inset of pneumonia, which destroys your immune system. And yet he continued to fight on. But men out there, and especially wives, girlfriends, family members, I was stubborn. Bernard was stubborn. Men are stubborn. They don't want to discuss prostate cancer. They don't want to go for a simple blood test. All it is, a little prick of the finger. You get a blood test, PSA. It saves lives before the cancer spreads and metastasizes, and then it's the battle for your life.
Like you, Bernie had to deal with a very private illness, which a lot of people don't want to talk about with even some of their loved ones. He had to deal with it very publicly with the whole world. I have to think that was very challenging. Another guy that knows what it's like to deal with prostate cancer on a world stage is former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, our colleague, who you can hear every afternoon at 3 p.m., who's joining us now. Mr. Mayor, thanks so much for joining us. Wish it were under better circumstances.
I wish it was to Curtis and Frank. I mean, I heard about it last night, and I haven't been able to really sleep. And I knew Bernie forever when he was with Imus, and going way back. And it's a great loss. I mean, the man was an exceptional human being, a brilliant man, a funny man, a nice man, a good man. I can say everything about him, everything. And just one of the great brains that existed, just as a brain. And you're right, Curtis. Here we are. You're saying the same things that was said 21 years ago when I had prostate cancer. If men would only go get the PSA test. I keep telling my doctor, Dr. Kirschenbaum, Alexander Kirschenbaum, is, I think, one of the greatest doctors in the world. He's a great psychiatrist as well as a great surgeon. And he has a wonderful capacity of getting men to deal with prostate cancer. I send people to Alex, even if they have other doctors, just to have him spend an hour with them, sort of straightening their heads out about it. But you're absolutely right. We grow up with all kinds of weird ideas. I don't know what they are. All kinds of weird ideas about prostate cancer, and we don't want to go for the test. We're afraid of the digital rectal exam. It's like we're 5-year-olds.
Well, also, Rudy, men are terrified that they're going to become impotent, incontinent, like a eunuch, unable to function.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, but you won't be able to be with your wife anymore. You won't be able to be with women anymore. You'll be like a baby. All kinds of weird stuff. And then they also have this thing about cancer in general, which is, I don't want to know. I'm not going to go check. If I don't check, I'm not going to have it. And it's just the opposite. Cancer is, I'm not going to say a curable disease if you catch it early, but percentage-wise, it's getting there. In other words, I might be off a little bit of 70, 60% of the cancer you're going to cure if you get it early. And prostate cancer and breast cancer, for example, are two of them. So I was lucky. I got it. I was 21 years ago. My father wasn't. My father had it like like Bernie did. My father got it, and it was metastasized, and he lasted for like 4 years with it, which was almost maybe 5. It was a miracle, but it was a painful death and a difficult one.
And Mayor, the thing that I think it's important to emphasize for a lot of fellows listening to you and Curtis talk about the importance of PSA tests and regular preventive health is that some people think if they work out, if they eat right, that if they're in great shape, that they're not going to have to worry about this. Bernie was in phenomenal shape. He worked out all the time. He ran. He ate right.
Prostate cancer is one of those things that I think, as far as I can tell, is completely. I remember when I first went to Alex, I said, Alex, should I give up having cigars? He said, you probably should give up having cigars, but cigars don't give you prostate cancer. Right. You can be smoke free all your life, and it's not going to help you with prostate cancer. I mean, it'll help you with a lot of other things. And I mean, it's a probably somewhat genetic disease. So any man whose father or grandfather had prostate cancer has a 50% chance, greater chance of getting it. Not 100%. A lot of kids that fathers have it don't, but it is 50%. So if you got a male in your family that had prostate cancer, like my son Andrew, for example, you start getting tested. They like to say at 40 or something. Or 50. I think you start getting tested at 35 and get used to it. It's only a blood test. Gosh, you get it anyway for other. Anytime you're sick, they take blood out of you.
And it's just a prick of the finger. And the other thing is, we fail to realize that Bernie grew up in the shadow of that because Imus himself was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Thank God his wife, Dietl, was into holistic, homeopathic.
On the radio with him,
right, treatment, and she guided him through. So Bernie was part of that, and yet still, this is the way men are. They don't want to discuss it. They're in denial. And I remember being in that room, Mr. Mayor, with Bernie, and I knew it was too late. He described symptoms to me that I said, "Oh my God, it's metastasis." Yeah. But he fought it. And imagine, in addition, an appendicitis attack. His appendix exploded.
Well, that hurt him too. There are men nowadays. So I want to say to men who even have metastasized prostate cancer, they can do stuff for you now they couldn't have done years ago. But again, it's like a COVID thing. If your immune system is compromised, everything starts to become very dangerous.
Yes.
Because think of it, you have only a certain amount of capacity in your immune system. If you use it for one thing, great, you'll probably fight it. If you use it for two things, you're only half as effective. If you're using it for three things, one of them may kill you. So, it does have to do a little bit with your general state of what's going on with your body, but it doesn't take away from the fact that we can knock the hell out of this disease, Ben can, if you just go get tested every year. That's really what it takes.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
it is a slow moving disease. So it's not one of those diseases. Let's say you're a 55-year-old man. You go this year, you don't have it. If you get it within a year, 2 years, you're going to cure it. It's not one of those cancers that moves. It moves slowly, so you do have a little opportunity. But don't get lazy because of that.
Well, now, Mr. Mayor, I remember WABC TV every year had a prostate cancer run in Central Park. Magnificent. I mean, hundreds, thousands of people showed up. I know. I was there with you. And they stopped. There's no prostate cancer run any longer.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll tell you, it's really weird. I used to do, like, for about 15, 20 years, I used to do a thing with Michael Milken, of all people, right? Of course, I put Michael Milken in jail, right?
Yes.
We became friends over prostate cancer. We got together after I got it, and I actually had him to Gracie Mansion. I was the mayor. We spent the entire afternoon going over our differences over the case. We shook hands and we said, you and I can do a lot of money raising money for prostate cancer together. And we did. And we did it for about 12, 15 years with Night to Remember. And a lot of that emphasis has gone. Marvin Shanken of Cigar Aficionado led the way. Must have raised $20 million for prostate cancer, not just with me, but with all of the people that are part of Cigar Aficionado. And that's been gone now about 5-6 years, and there are so many of them. You're right. There are so many efforts.
Rudy, what we should do, along with obviously John and Margo, Catsimatidis, Chad, and the staff here at WABC, is maybe restart the prostate cancer run once a year for awareness in Bernard McGuire's name.
I sure as heck be part of that, and see if I can get a lot of those people, that used to be supportive of the milking thing, involved in it.
Yeah,
and,
we have to, because Bernie is the classic example. No one brighter, nobody more intelligent, nobody more well-read. He certainly knew about it.
In great shape.
Right, but having gone through it with Imus, who suffered with it for a while, and yet still would not get tested, refused. That was the way I was. I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, you had your struggles. Joe Torre had his struggles at that time, Yankee manager. Guy Molinari had his struggles, the borough president in Staten Island.
You go through it, boy, I'll tell you. And there are guys in politics that I know had it, and they won't tell anybody.
No, in fact,
once I got it, I became for a while a calling service.
Yes.
And people would call me, including, you can't believe, some Democrats who I would consider enemies. They call me and ask me for advice. And a few of them, it's confidential. They have never told anybody.
Yeah.
They're still embarrassed.
Well, let's do this, Rudy, Mr. Mayor, Chad. Let's, in honor of Bernard McGuirk, work towards reviving that run. The WABC TV used to have it. Was magnificent. I don't know. They discontinued it in Bernard's memory, but to heighten the awareness. Because imagine, 21 years after Rudy had it, Joe Torre the same time, you would have thought the word would have gotten out. Still,
Joe got me through it. Joe got it a year before me. Yes. And I was very empathetic. We spent a lot of time together. I didn't know much about it at the time, except my dad died of it. So I always thought of prostate cancer. I started to go to Night to Remember before I got it to help other people.
Well, Rudy,
I guess I knew I was going to get it because of my dad.
Yeah, well, Rudy,
or at least I felt like I was.
In honor of Bernard McGuirk, we got to do this.
Yes, I just got a text from John and Margo. They will absolutely be.
Oh, I know.
We will get behind that. We will get behind that.
We could have promised it for them, not even tell them, and tell them later.
Absolutely.
You know how they are.
Thank you, Rudy, for sharing that.
All right. God bless him. A great man.
Thank
Absolutely.
you, Rudy.
As we continue our commemoration, the passing of Bernard McGuirk, but we're not just talking about his greatness. Coming up, Sid Rosenberg will be joining us, who, like everyone else, traumatized when he heard about the passing of his great partner, Bernard McGuirk, last night.
We will take a moment of silence as we honor our colleague, our friend, and one of the most gifted radio personalities of all time, Bernard McGuirk.
This is the Bernie and Sid Show on 77 WABC. Frank Morano here with Curtis Sliwa, Chad Lopez, and someone that became close to Bernie in a short amount of time, and someone who Bernie looked up to in the short amount of time that he knew him. Our owner, John Catsimatidis, who you heard earlier, who I know speaks for a lot of people when he talks about how significant Bernie was, a part of the regular daily routine for so many people for so long. John Catsimatidis has joined us in studio. Hello there, John.
Frank, it's since last night, when I heard about 8 o'clock last night, it was really shocking, and Margo is really taken back on this. And, we all knew, Curtis, you knew that it's going to happen eventually because. And I knew it was getting closer when I lit the candles and I sent it to him. He didn't answer. And but when the day actually happens, then the shock really sets in. And it's, I don't know what to say, but you know what I said, Curtis? That we should play a lot of Bernie McGuirk stuff, whether we do it on a different channel on WABCRadio.com, because as long as people hear his voice, and he'll always be alive.
No doubt about it. And somebody that goes back literally decades with Bernie, and through an incredible partnership has been able to make this show the number one talk show in this city, is Sid Rosenberg, and he's on the line with us now. Sid, my heart goes out to you. Words fail me, and I can only imagine how you must be feeling. My condolences on the loss of your partner and your friend.
Well, thank you. It's a tough morning. I do want to thank you and Curtis and John and Chad and everybody who's called in. John said it best. I knew how bad it was, too. I spoke to Bernie. I told you this, Frank. A couple of mornings ago, I spoke to Bernard last Wednesday. And I even made the comparison to Jim Conn's character in Brian's song. His voice was so weak. But we had a nice conversation. He thanked me for what he did at the gala. And the last thing he said was, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And this is an immense loss. Like John said, we knew he was sick, and we knew this day was coming. But when it comes, it's not easy. And, guys, my history is not about me today, but a lot of people turn their backs on me. And he never did. He never did. And I'm just very sad today. I probably shouldn't even call in, but I feel like I need to. I'm going to miss him.
Sid, we're glad you have called in. We can't imagine the pain you must be feeling. I could tell you the only thing when Bernie would talk to me privately on when you had shingles and I filled in for you, sat in your chair for a week. The thing that he said he enjoyed even more than laughing with you and having a good time was when you guys were fighting like crazy, especially in the run up to the 2016 presidential election. That's not something that I think a lot of radio partners would say about their counterpart.
No, that's a great point. You're right. And that was a wild year. It was my first year back in New York. And I talked about this, guys, that, when my first book came out back in 2010, all my good friends in the industry wrote chapters in the book about me. And Bernard wrote a beautiful chapter in the book and said, I look forward to the day when me and Sid get to do our own show together. And that happened 6 years after he wrote that chapter. And I came back in 2016, and I was a Hillary Clinton, not a supporter, but I voted for Hillary. I didn't like Donald Trump. And we had epic battles, Frank, Curtis, John, Chad. We had, as you guys know, we had epic battles every day. And eventually the smarter guy won, We had a great radio show. People loved us. And you can argue back and forth about the two of us, but one argument you can't make is that he wasn't the smartest guy in the room. And he was right about Trump, and he converted me, guys. And my new book is there's two forwards in the book. John wrote one, and Bernard wrote one. And I went back this morning. I couldn't sleep at 3 a.m. And I just read the forward over and over again because it was so emotional. And he wrote that forward when he had already been diagnosed with cancer. And reading it now, it really does provide a whole new perspective. Guys, he was just a good man. He was loyal, loving. He loved his country. He loves Carol and his children. And his mom, who's passed away, and his dad, who's still alive, and his sister, who passed away too. He loved WABC. He loved working with me. And he loved all of you guys. And, there's a lot of bad guys in this business. You guys know that over the years, a lot of bad guys. And he was one of the few really good guys. And this is a tragic loss, not just for radio, not just for New York, but for mankind. This is a horrible loss. He did pass away on Yom Kippur, which is kind of, I guess to a certain extent for a Jewish person like me, the holiest day of the year. That's the day we lost Bernard. So maybe God picked that day to to take them home.
Now, Sid, what a lot of people don't know is that Bernard McGuire had your back 1,000% when you were down in Florida. He would come to me and he'd say, Curtis, we got to get Sid up here. We got to team him together with me. This will be a great show. We got to do everything we can do because at that time, Sid, there are a lot of people, as you know, did not want you coming back, did not want you to be at WABC. Bernie looked them all in the eyes and he said, I know Sid. I know the good. I know the bad. He does great radio. I want him to be my partner. We've earned this right. And I said, you got it, Bernie. To the mats we go. We hit the mattresses, stirred the marinara sauce, and magic came about. You and Bernie, mid-mornings, and then in the mornings replacing Imus. The best thing that Chad Lopez ever did was sign that piece of paper to say, this is our team, Bernie and Sid. I don't care what everybody else says. We're going with the best, not like the rest. Bernie had you back 1,000%, Sid.
No, you're right, Curtis, and so did you, by the way, and I've never forgotten that. And yes, Chad, I'm sorry. Chad showed a lot of courage, and Bernie loved Chad. I'll always love Chad for that. He did make that decision to put us together. I know, Curtis, you were a big part of that as well. Jill, Pete Morgan, a host of others. And it worked out great. And like I said in my Facebook post this morning, we did it. We got to number one. We did it. But, you know, today, for me at least, it's less about the show. It's less about radio. You know, Curtis, I had a lot of, as you know, private conversations with Bernard over the years. Even when I was in Florida and I was struggling with multiple addictions and hurting myself and my family. And there were very few people I can turn to because everybody's your best friend when you're number one in New York City. But when you've been exiled to Florida, you'd be surprised how many people all of a sudden stop caring. And that was never Bernard. And he and I had some very long conversations. And when I was in Florida, talking about the day that maybe one day we'll be back together. But he was always so optimistic for the folks that listen to the radio show when I would have these neurotic moments. He'd always kind of bring me back to that place where he could take a bad situation and make it seem okay. I leaned on him for that, guys. And every time I did, the results were great. So on this day, I want to thank all the listeners out there. For 10 months, I've been receiving, and I'm not exaggerating, John, Chad, Curtis, and Frank, thousands of messages. People got upset with me if I wasn't updating Bernard's condition every day, but I just had nothing to say. I knew this day was coming, and it wasn't easy for me either. But I do want to thank all the listeners and all you guys at WABC for constantly caring and showing it, and he saw it, and he appreciated it too. None of it went unnoticed. So thank you to everybody. And one day we'll all see Bernard again in a much better place.
Sid, God bless you. We're thinking about you as much as we're thinking about Bernie and his family and remembering our own time with him. We're thinking a lot about you, and we'll look forward to seeing you here soon.
Thank you so much. Hey, Frank and Curtis, he's such wonderful people, both you guys. And John, my God, John, he loved you and Margo and Chad and the whole listening audience. Thank you to everybody. And we'll talk again very, very soon. Thank you, guys.
And let me make one thing clear, Sid. I've done the morning show. Other people have done the morning show. Never better than Bernie McGuirk and Sid Rosenberg. Number one in the eternity of the greatest news talk station in the nation. Let it ring out forever. Bernard McGuirk, Sid Rosenberg, the very best that radio could ever be. Thank you. Thank you, Sid.
Thank you, Curtis. We both love you. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you. Bye-bye.
As somebody that's been an integral part of the success of the Bernie and Sid morning show, especially this year, has been Lydia Serrani, who's been doing Lydia Reports, who is joining us right now. Lydia, Oh, she's going to join us after the break. Curtis Sliwa is here. John Catsimatidis is here. Chad Lopez is here. We're remembering the life and times of Bernard McGuirk. Our sincerest condolences going out to his family. We miss him already. Nobody tougher, nobody smarter, nobody funnier. And on Tuesday morning, we're going to do a whole day of tributes to Bernard McGuirk. And we miss him, and we're thinking about him. We'll hear from Lydia Serrani and Bill O'Reilly coming up this hour. This is the Bernie and Sid show. Frank Morano here, Curtis Sliwa, John Catsimatidis, and Chad Lopez. This is the Bernie and Sid show on 77 WABC. Frank Morano here with Curtis Sliwa, John Catsimatidis, and Chad Lopez as we remember the life and legacy of Bernard McGuirk, who unfortunately passed away yesterday after a lengthy battle with cancer. On Tuesday, we're doing a whole special show all about Bernard McGuirk and paying tribute to him. We got some great guests that are going to share their memories of working with Bernard. And it was very interesting to hear Sid so emotional. I think the last time I heard Sid so emotional was at our 100th anniversary gala, when you could hear a pin drop as Sid shared some of his memories, and he was very emotional talking about what Bernard and that partnership meant to him. If anybody wants to see the video of Sid's remarks that day, which caused 1,000 people to come to their feet, we've actually just uploaded it to WABCRadio.com because people have been calling and asking so they could see that for themselves at WABCRadio.com. I want to welcome Lydia Serrani, who, as part of the Lydia Reports segment that she does daily, has been working with Bernie for some time and has remarked to me privately many times of what a fan she is of Bernie, both privately, both personally and professionally. Lydia, I think we're all having a tough time today. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's he was such a good guy. I'm sorry, I wasn't like planning on getting emotional, but now that it's like really hit me because I'm doing the report and he's not on, but Bernie was the type of guy that he was just so funny, and he came across as like a really tough guy. You know, he was from the Bronx. I'm from the Bronx, so we had that in common. He went to the same tough high school as my husband did. And I'll never forget it when I did my first solo show. And out of nowhere, so I started there like in September, in a full-time capacity doing talk show radio. And, you know, I was a TV reporter before that, so I did this show. And out of nowhere, Bernie sends me an email, and I have the email because I printed it out and I put it in my office because I look at it often because I'm like, wow, if this icon, this amazing talent says this about me, then it means I have a future. And he wrote, "You sounded great. For reals." And then he put exclamation, exclamation. Of course, we're totally on the same page. I now realize I can't believe how good you sounded. You're amazing. You have a real future ahead of you. So he would constantly send me like these great emails, these notes of encouragement. He was just an all around great guy. They just, as the saying goes, they don't make him like Bernie anymore.
Yeah, I think also, Lydia, a lot of people don't realize that Bernie, aside from growing up in the Bronx in the projects, a white guy in a predominantly black and Hispanic area, he then went on after going to Cardinal Hayes and Mount St. Vincent up in Riverdale. He was driving livery cab up in Yonkers. He's going from Getty Square to the Schlobein projects to Mumford Gardens. These are rough, tough areas. Nodine Hill. To earn a living. Talked about them many times. Said he was robbed at gunpoint, pistol whipped. Yeah. And here's a guy who was like a treasure, but at any moment his life could have been taken. And yet he was definitely street smart and could convey that on the radio like nobody I had ever heard before.
He was just really smart. Talk about self-made. You know, he came from nothing and he just kept fighting and fighting, like his valiant fight against cancer. And cancer also has touched my family. So I'm just glad that he is no longer in any more pain. And, you know, we just have to remember Bernie for all the great things he's done, and also take this moment to hug our loved ones a little tighter and remember that our future is not guaranteed. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters is love. That love lives on forever. You know, our legacy lives on forever. Money, all those other things, they go away. You can't take it with you. But the love you leave behind, the love of your family, that endures forever.
One thing you got to do, Lydia, you got to take your husband, get him that PSA test. It's just a prick on the finger, a little blood test. The women in men's lives have to lead the men to get the simple PSA test. that could prevent the kind of problem that Bernie had, that I had, that Rudy had. We didn't get the test. We waited too long. Unfortunately for Bernard, it took his life.
Right.
So let that be a reminder. Simple PSA test, prick of the finger blood test. And if the guys won't do it, women, children of the household, grab your grandfathers, fathers, grab them and get them to a quick PSA test later.
John, what were you saying, John? It's a 99% just for this quick test.
The cure rate is like 98, 99% these days. But
If you catch it early.
You got to catch it early. I mean, and it's so sad that everybody out there, you should all go on your next blood test. Make sure you focus on it, and that way you could live and be there with your families, and that's what it's all about.
Thanks,
I
Lydia.
wasn't.
Sorry.
I just one little thing. I wasn't going to share this story on the air, but you guys inspired me. So I had a mammogram recently, and I didn't want to do it because I'm like, hey, I'm not old. I don't want to have a mammogram. So I did the mammogram. They found something. I'd never been more scared in my life. I had a brother who died of cancer. And so I went through, I got the biopsy done. I didn't want to do it. I kept pushing it off. And then I remembered what happened with Bernie. And I said, you know what? Let me get this biopsy done, get it over with. It's not comfortable. You have to do it. I did it. Thank God I am okay. But that's why it's so important. It's not comfortable. I remember having a long conversation with Bernie, and he was resistant. And I love Bernie. He was resistant on getting the biopsy. It's uncomfortable, but you guys got to do it. Listen to your doctor. If something turns up, it's 9 times out of 10, you'll be fine, but just go through it. Like I'm fine now. And, maybe we would have Bernie here today. We don't know. Maybe not. So, but just everybody listen to your doctor. And if you're a woman, get those mammograms, get the pap smear. If you're a guy, go get that, PSA test. And, we'll all miss Bernie.
Great message, Lydia. May we speak again under better circumstances soon. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to continue on the Bernie and Sid show. Chad Lopez here, Curtis Sliwa, John Catsimatidis, and me, Frank Morano. Bill O'Reilly joining us shortly to share some of his recollections working with Bernie on the radio and on television. A whole tribute that we're planning for Bernie McGuirk this Tuesday morning. If you want to see the video, that Sid Rosenberg brought a whole crowd of over 1,000 people to their feet, and you could hear a pin drop. We've just uploaded that to WABCRadio.com because folks were asking for it. This is the Bernie and Sid show. Bill O'Reilly, straight ahead. Frank Morano here with John Catsimatidis, Curtis Sliwa, and our president, Chad Lopez. And Bernie was really proud of a lot of the work that he did on the radio, but he was also incredibly proud over the years at some of the television work that he did, especially on Fox News every week with Bill O'Reilly. He would not let anybody in his life ever miss those segments. It was something he put a lot of work into it, and you could tell because it came across as entertaining and as insightful as can be. And then I know he was really proud to call Bill O'Reilly a colleague when he joined our lineup, and now you could hear him every night at 9 p.m. He joins us now. Bill, tough day for everybody. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, it's my honor to talk about McGuirk. I always call him by his last name because that's what Irish guys in New York do. And if you'd permit me a couple of minutes, I want to bring some perspective to Bernie McGuirk's life because I've lived pretty much the same life. So he's from an ethnic Irish home in the Bronx. My father is a Brooklyn guy, and he went to Cardinal Hayes High School. I went to Chaminade High School. We played each other in sports. Same environment, pretty much the brothers. We're trying to shape up these kids who could go either way, discipline, no BS. Then McGuirk, Yonkers, that's where my mother's side was. And so we had all kinds of intersections in life. But the main one was this, and New Yorkers are a special breed. We all know that. We're not like everybody else in the country, and sometimes the country doesn't like that. But we are a people of straight talk. And so that's what McGuirk was. And I put him on television with Gutfeld. It was Gutfeld and McGuirk, as McGuirk would demand, McGuirk and Gutfeld. And they were two together, and me. And we would just kick it around, a fabulously successful segment. And then he took that edge, and he brought it to WABC. And when we think about Bernard McGuirk's life, the capstone of his life was the enormous success that he had with Rosenberg. I mean, I've said this before, and I don't blow smoke at anybody, and you guys at WABC know that. What Bernie and Sid have done in the morning is unprecedented. It's never happened, not only in New York City, I don't think anywhere in the United States. You take a station that was basically over, okay, in the marketplace, number 22 or 3. Catsimatidis buys it, Lopez is there, they reconfigure the talent, and now in the morning is number 1. And McGuirk, obviously, along with Sid, drove it. And the success that he and Sid had was a source of pride. Because ethnic Irish guys, Jewish guys, Italian guys, Polish guys, African Americans, Hispanic, doesn't matter. The success is driven on one thing: hard work. That's what binds us all together. So nobody ever gave Bernard McGuirk anything. Nobody ever gave Bill O'Reilly anything. We didn't have any uncles in the business. We didn't have any pathway to a Mercedes-Benz unless we bought it with our own money that we had to earn. That kind of a mentality, that kind of a lifestyle, if you will, is what separates working people from, I don't know, you use the adjective, from people who kind of feel entitled in life. Well, where's mine? Give me this. I want this. You don't hear that from us. All right? So we go to work, and we do the best we can. But I want people to understand who never met Bernard Goldberg, that Goldberg and we had this relationship, but it wasn't based on like hugging or, I mean, it was just like we knew that we had shared experience. And that experience wasn't that easy. It was a little turbulent in the Bronx. I was in Levittown, which was a lot lighter than the Bronx. But we knew that we were, honest. There was no BS. BS is not allowed in our precincts. I mean, you get, people, I can't even describe it. But if there's somebody in the circle where whether it's a restaurant or something, and they're just spouting nonsense, everybody just looks at them and they just shut up. They know. And so McGuirk was a unique Irish Catholic New Yorker. He came from where I came from. He succeeded magnificently on his own. I mean, obviously WABC helped him, but he had to do it on the ball field. He had to come through on the ball field, which he did. And I think that this is a sad day for all of us who love McGuirk. But I think what we need to do is now pivot on to we were privileged to know him. And that's my summation of Bernard McGuirk.
Well said. I mean, Bill, he would talk repeatedly about how of all the people that he ever had in studio, I don't know if it was your height, I don't know if it was your ratings, I don't know if it was all the best-selling books. He said you were the only guy that he always found a little intimidating. Even though you guys have a lot of shared experiences, you certainly had a special place in his heart and in his brain. But I look back at those segments that you did; they still stand up just as well today as 10 years ago. How funny was McGuirk?
Well, McGuirk had this sardonic humor that, again, New Yorkers understand. Okay? So Gutfeld was throwing one-liners at you. He writes them, and and they're good, and he's been very successful. But McGuirk is more of he was observant. All right? So he'd look around, and then he'd just crush it. And I remember McGuirk on Imus one time. I was on Imus occasionally, and Imus did not really like me very much, which is fine. I mean, I'm kind of used to that. And then he's given McGuirk, the segment's over. The segment was good, but, I don't take any guff from Imus, and that's what Imus wanted. He wanted you to kiss his butt, but I'm not going to do that. So after the segment's over, Imus is railing about me, and I'm a dimwit or whatever he's using, hideous, I think what the word was. And McGuirk, on the radio to his boss, goes, "Hey, O'Reilly's a national treasure." Okay? Standing right up to Imus, shutting him up. All right? He just was silence. And he didn't have to do that. McGuirk didn't have to do that. That's what they call speaking truth to power. I don't know if I'm not a national treasure, but McGuirk wasn't afraid of anybody. All right? He's not going to pander to you. And that's the kind of guys I like. So I'm on the D-Day beach. Who do I want in my foxhole? McGuirk. Right? And that, to me, is the measure of a man. That you can depend on him. That he will tell the truth. That he will do his job. That he will respect his family. Those are all the values that I have. And they were handed down to me by my parents and handed down to McGuirk by his parents.
Now, Bill O'Reilly, Curtis Sliwa here. I remember you way back in Portland, Oregon, when I was starting the Guardian Angels out there, and you were a newscaster there. You were the anchor, and I'm sure you felt that you were in a box because you couldn't be the person that you eventually became, being able to do so much commentary. I always felt that way about Bernard McGuirk with Imus, is that he was in a box, and then when suddenly he was teamed together with Sid Rosenberg here at WABC after John and Margo rescued this station, it was magic. We got a chance to hear Bernard McGuirk in all of his forms, not just the comedic side. The guy was so well read. In fact, when I was recovering from colitis, ileitis, and chronic Crohn's disease, he gave me a whole pack of books that I read while in recovery. Great stuff. He said, "You got to read these books, Curtis. I know you can't move, but this is great stuff." And we got to see the all-round Bernard McGuirk that you didn't often get a chance to hear or see on the Imus in the Morning Show on TV or on radio.
Yeah, his job was to produce Imus. Imus did not want to be upstaged, and I understand that. And McGuirk did it well. But let me say, throw one more thing in there. The reason that WABC has succeeded in New York City is one word: authenticity. It is an authentic station made up of authentic people. I mean, how many times does everybody turn on a television set and watch various programs and these people are phony? You know they are trying to tell you what they think you want to hear. And you, Curtis, in the political realm, I mean, you see that all day long, okay? But WABC has managed to put together a lineup where these people on the air are authentic. And I told Rosenberg and McGuirk when they were ascending on WABC, when the ratings were going up, and I said, this is why. Yeah, you guys are funny, you're glib, you have a point of view, you're not afraid, you're saying what you want to say, and all of those things New Yorkers respect. But the big thing you have is that people listening to WABC know you're like them. It's a shared experience. You're like them.
And the other
Rosenberg from Brooklyn, and that's your success too, Sliwa.
Yeah.
I mean, you come in and people go, Sliwa, we know who Sliwa is. He's not going to, come in and do any ridiculous stuff. We know what we can depend on. So authenticity is what McGuirk had, and that is the hallmark of ethnic homes in the New York area. Ask Catsimatidis. He comes over and he's Greek. All right, and there's a culture there in the home, and it's not like you start to walk in and act, with airs or, with a dopey accent or use stupid cliches. It's not what we do. And so the authenticity that McGuirk brought, along with his intelligence and his wit, once you got that package on the air, then you're number one.
Bill O'Reilly, that's what we all do, and it's about we respect our heritage, we respect our culture, and we're fighting hard for this November 8th, Bill O'Reilly, that they're not going to change America on us. We want America the way me and you and Curtis and Frank Morano and Chad grew up.
And so did McGuirk. McGuirk was appalled. He was absolutely appalled at the crime in particular. And so am I, and so are you, and we're saying to our fellow New Yorkers, the only people who can stop this are you. And you can't keep voting for people who are going to put you in danger, who are going to exploit you, who are going to lie to you. And there's no reason on earth that 3 million people should be leaving New York State. So you've got to wise up. But McGuirk, the final thing I want to say, I know we're up against the clock here, is that he just couldn't abide phonies. In some of my conversations with him, he'd say, what about this one? On Fox News, he'd go, what about her? Or what about him? And I would tell him, I said, look, McGuirk, you can't be quoting me, but, you know, if the person was a phony, and he go, I knew it. You know, because I identify with Bernard McGuire, we can't abide that. We want honest, genuine people, and that's what Bernard McGuire was.
Bill, finally, you've seen in media and politics a lot of people face adversity and then make some pretty tremendous comebacks, and even more people have had failed comeback attempts. Bernie McGuirk, with the incident in April of 2007 with the Rutgers situation, a lot of people thought his career was over in media. Turns out it was just beginning. Wondering if you could talk about what kind of stick-to-itiveness, what kind of intestinal fortitude it takes to come back from being mocked, being pilloried, called a racist, and then come back to do the number one news talk show in the biggest market in the country.
Everybody makes mistakes in life. We live in an unforgiving time where people exploit those mistakes. But if you understand the neighborhood, that's the key to McGuirk's comeback, the neighborhood. So when we're growing up as kids, you had a fight, and you get knocked down. And what do you do when you get knocked down? Call for mommy? You get up, and you go on. And most of the time in the neighborhood, you make friends with the person who knocked you down. But Irish Catholic New Yorkers, yeah, we're going to take it. We have to, but we're not folding. We're not going to fold. You go on. You go to work. You absorb the punishment. This makes you stronger.
Bill, thank you for calling in.
Bill, it's Chad. 1 second. I'm sorry. Irish Catholic New Yorkers, but let's not forget a very good boxer Bernie was.
That's for sure.
He had to be.
That's for sure. He showed Sid what's up. If you want to check out Bill O'Reilly's new book, Killing the Legends, it's already a bestseller. You can check it out at BillO'Reilly.com. There's signed copies available as well.
And he's on every night from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, the number one show on WABC radio at night, Bill O'Reilly.
Thank you, Bill.
When we come back, is the untold story. How in the interim, when they put Bernard McGuirk and the Amish show on the shelf after the Rutgers situation, Bernie, they wanted him in Boston. And then he was going to be a morning talk show host there. And then all the very people that he had helped over the years to get on the Amish in the Morning show turned on him, stuck him in the back with a shiv, and prevented him from having a show of his own. I'll tell you the story because I was up in Boston at the time. Right here exclusively on the day we commemorate the passing of our friend, our colleague, Bernard McGuire.
Curtis, right before we went to break, you were telling a story about how right after the Imus show in its previous incarnation at WFAN fell apart. Everybody knows that story. Bernie had an opportunity to do a show on a huge talk station in Boston. What happened? Why didn't that come to be?
Well, a little backstory. So Imus in the Morning's crew is fired by WFAN, and they're persona non grata. They're labeled as racist. Now, say what you may about the other members of the crew. Imagine you're Bernard McGuire. you're an Irish white guy who grew up in the heart of the South Bronx amongst black and Hispanics in the Monroe housing projects, one of the most hardcore housing projects in the city. You went to Cardinal Hayes, an integrated high school. Your whole life was spent with blacks and Hispanics, and you're being tarred and feathered as a racist. Al Slim Shady Sharpton, Barack Obama, who got on the Amos show because Bernard McGuirk, as the producer, said this will be good for you. The national show, okay, all friends, never mind just the African Americans. Tim Russert, Mike Lupica, they all dropped Imus like a hot rock, like he was no longer a person of consequence. And so Bernard McGuirk, he's got a family to feed. He's got a family to take up. Plus, he's a great radio personality. So bright minds in Boston at WRKO, which is the WABC of the Boston area, says, wow, a white Irish guy is perfect in our market. So they were going to team him with the Speaker of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, the most powerful Democrat in Massachusetts at the time, Thomas Finneran. And they had it all set up. And then Sharpton makes his calls, Barack Obama and other African-American leaders. They say, you bring on Bernard McGuirk, and we're going to boycott WRKO. We're going after all your sponsors. So I'm there the next week because there was a crime crisis in Boston, and the Boston Herald invited me up to deal with it. And so Tom Finneran brings me on in the morning show, the most popular show. He goes, your friend, from New York, he was going to be my partner, Bernard McGuirk. And they just shut it down. So imagine the embarrassment. You're being hired on WRKO because you couldn't work in New York City. You were labeled a racist. You go up there and they drive you right out. Now imagine, in his mind, he's driving livery cab for years up in Yonkers. He's taking passengers to Schlobein Projects, Rough Place, Mumford Gardens. He's in Getty Square. He's in Odine Hill. He's going into neighborhoods most white guys who never drive a livery cab. He's being robbed at gunpoint. He's being pistol whipped. He's as close to black and Hispanics as any white guy could ever be. And yet people would look at him, you're a racist. And all during that interim, Imus, as was said so aptly by Bo Dietl, wanted to get rid of him. He wanted to blame Bernard McGuirk for what was said about the Scarlet Knights. You imagine he wanted to throw Bernard McGuirk under the bus. That's why part of the reason Bernard wanted to go to Boston, establish his own career. And then, to my misfortune, and to the fortune of the Imus crew and Bernard McGuirk, they were brought to WABC by a guy who was running, at that time, Citadel, Suleiman, who had worked with them at the WFAN and revived their career. That made me and Kubi were on the shelf. But all during that time, remember how I would do TV appearances in support of Imus and in support of Bernard McGuirk and say, hey, this is crazy. And people would say, you're putting a mark on your back, Curtis. Yeah, they could end up coming to WABC. I said, it doesn't matter. They were right. How could you do this, especially to Bernard McGuirk? And then my appearance on the Howard Stern show, that was my gift to Bernard McGuirk because, Howard wanted to steer me into bashing Imus, which I did. And at that time, Suleiman warned me, you'll be fired, if you attack Imus. But then I devoted 45 minutes of my time there with Howard Stern to talking about what an integral part of the Imus in the Morning show Bernard McGuirk was. And for the very first time, people heard that, especially in an adversarial audience. And Bernie couldn't have been more appreciative of the fact that he finally got the tributes he deserved, without which there couldn't have been an Imus in the Morning show. He was Don Imus. He spoke in his ear. He read the books. He fed him the lines. He got the guests. When Imus would blow up, he kept the crew together. There was no mutiny on the Bounty. When Imus would piss off guests, it was Bernard McGuirk who had to go in and do the shidduch, had to bring them back together. And yet, when all of a sudden they didn't have a job, all their fair weather friends, Tim Russert, Mike Lupica, Barack Obama, Al Sharpton, stuck to shiv. It was like the Ides of March. And Bernard just kept moving on. When he came to WABC, he had a brand new life. He could be Bernard McGuirk, the one he always wanted to be, the one he was going to be at WRKO with Thomas Finneran as his partner. And he would have led that show. They would have loved him in Boston.
No doubt about it.
An Irish guy like Bernard McGuirk in Boston, he would have been number one in a matter of months.
Yes, he would.
And they took it away from him.
No doubt about it. I mean, just one quick note based on all the names you just listed, and I think you're exactly right. Tim Russert, unlike Harold Ford Jr. and a lot of people, did at least come on with Imus after they came back to WABC, and I was with Bernie.
Yeah, but that's WABC.
Yeah,
Come on.
I know, but I was with
He never
Bernie.
came to their aid when they were drowning.
But I was with Bernie when he was informed that Tim Russert passed away. And Bernie, everybody knows him as tough. Everybody knows him as unflappable. Everybody knows him as strong. He was visibly shaken that Tim Russert passed away. And when Phil Boyce told him, he said, you've got to be pulling my leg. I can't believe it. And that's an aspect of Bernie's life that I don't think people have a full understanding and a full appreciation of, is how smart he is, how tough he was, but also how sensitive he was. And that's not something that he wore on his sleeve.
And forgiving.
That's right.
Unlike me.
That's right.
I don't forgive, I don't forget. But Bernie would. He forgave most of the people who came back and tried to destroy the Imus in the Morning show, including Bernard McGuire. Remember, it was always Imus and Bernie, Imus and Bernie. That's what they kept saying. Racist.
Yes.
How unfair to tar and feather him with that.
Well, to your point about forgiveness, Ron Kuby was one of those people that called him a racist. And when you guys came back to WABC, Bernie was ready to confront him for this, and he was ready to deck him, essentially.
I would have appreciated that.
But to Bernie's credit, they actually became very friendly, and they became, that goes to show you. I don't know that I could do that and have that degree of self-restraint if somebody would have called me a racist and attack my reputation, but Bernie did. Bigger man than most.
Can I jump in here for a second? As with Bernie, he was. There's one thing when behind the scenes, right? We always say what happens in the station. Our listeners want to know, because that's where you truly get to see the person and who they are, right? I want to make sure that our audience understands who Bernie is here, where what he did, he gave back. To that point, Matt Meany, who was was the morning show's executive producer. Bernie spent time with Matt Meany. He supported him. Matt Meany is now our program director. Matt Meany looks up to Bernie, and Bernie knew that, and Bernie would sit with him after shows. Curtis, you do that, right? Frank, you do that. That's what giving back to the industry is, and putting someone like that in there. Justin, who's now, our executive producer for the show, did a great job with Justin, had many personal conversations with Bernie. So that's where I think the difference is when we look at Imus, we look at Bernie sitting down, right, where he cared about the people, and it's not just the listeners out there. He wanted a great product, working with Sid, but also inside the station. And when he showed up every morning and he sat with them and talked about things and putting a show together, I think that's something that we have to remember, the sense that we're going to lose.
The sense that I always got, as important as radio was to him and as seriously as he took it, the most important thing to him was his family, his wife Carol, his kids.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that he was able to be a part of his son's wedding and to be healthy for his son's wedding, because I know it meant a lot for him to be there. And I know how close he was with both of his children, but especially his son.
And then later on, before we end at 10, I got to tell the story about Bernie McGuirk in the bowels of Penn Station, in the midst of the COVID-19 crackdown. You remember, I was the sheriff of Penn Station.
And we were walking around.
I was having a hard time with a guy who was having a psychotic disorder. And you know who had my back? He was dressed like Lawrence Arabia. He had a shiv in his sleeve.
Save that story, Curtis, for
right?
later on.
Oh, my God.
I
might not be here today if it wasn't for Bernard McGuire.
100% right.
We're going to talk with Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman in a moment. This is the Bernie and Sid Show. Frank Morano here with Curtis Sliwa and Chad Lopez as we remember the life and legacy of Bernard McGuire. We're doing a whole special tribute show to him on Tuesday. If you want to see Sid's remarks at the recent WABC 100th anniversary gala, you can go to WABCradio.com. Also, there's now a comment box for a lot of listeners have been asking how can they send well wishes to Bernie's family and to those of us here at the station. There's a comment box on WABCradio.com for you to do that. We've just set that up just now. Bruce Blakeman joins us straight ahead. This is the Bernie and Sid Show. I'm Frank Morano here with Curtis Sliwa and Chad Lopez. That's because, unfortunately, Bernard McGuire, a legendary radio personality and an even better guy, passed away yesterday after bravely fighting cancer. this entire year. A lot of people loved him. A lot of people who never met him loved him. And we certainly miss him already. And somebody that he got to know a little bit, and somebody that he campaigned for actually last year in a big election, is the Nassau County Executive, Bruce Blakeman, who's calling in. Mr. County Executive, thanks so much for calling in. I know it's a tough day for everybody.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to personally express my condolences to John Catsimatidis, Sid Rosenberg, and Bernie's family, and the whole WABC family on the passing of a great guy, Bernie McGuirk. He's a resident of Nassau County. We were very proud that he was a resident, and he was wonderful to me in my campaign last year. He gave me a forum, he and Sid, so that I could get my message across. And I don't think I would have been successful if I had not been on the Bernie and Sid show. And I just want to say that he was a wonderful man. And on behalf of the 1.4 million residents in Nassau County, this is a tremendous loss of a great Nassau County resident.
That's awfully nice. And I know he was quite fond of you as well. Thank you, Mr. Blakeman. We'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. God bless you all and his family.
Thank you. In just a moment, we're going to play for you some of the remarks that Sid Rosenberg made at the gala, the 100th anniversary gala, which brought 1,000 people to their feet, and you could hear a pin drop. But, Curtis, you were mentioning the situation in Penn Station at the height of COVID, where it was anarchy. A lot of people weren't coming to work, so a lot of days it seemed like in Penn Station the only folks that were there were homeless people. What happened? What was Bernard McGuirk's involvement with that?
Well, you had homeless people, you had emotionally disturbed persons that went there because it was the only bathroom that was open. All the shops were closed. Chad Lopez was down there often, and it was like a scene out of Dante's Inferno.
It was crazy.
All the social service organizations, both the religious and secular, that used to come down and take care of the emotionally disturbed and homeless had left because they thought they would die of COVID. Because remember, back then, people, they would be put on ventilators and that's it. You wouldn't hear from them again, into the ICU, into the ER, over. So I and the Guardian Angels were down there 24 hours a day. And I basically became the sheriff of Penn Station because there was no law enforcement. They wouldn't have anything to do with these people who would act up. So the only reason that they generally listen to me and the Guardian Angels is we would bring them food, clothing. We would wash them down with alcohol. Remember, coronavirus was spreading at that point, and that was the population most vulnerable. We would take them to the bathroom. We would take them to Bellevue to get their prescriptions refilled. So they depended on us. We were the lifeline. Bernard McGuirk would come through Penn Station before his show in the wee hours in the morning, and then he would go through there after the show, many times taking the Long Island Railroad. He would be dressed like Lawrence of Arabia, completely covered up. You would think that he was on his way to a mosque to pray, do his 5 times a day prayer, and he had a shiv in his sleeve. And he would say, Curtis, this is my guardian angel. Down there are guys all the time brawling, fighting, attacking people. It's the only thing that would protect me from becoming a victim. So one mid-morning, I'm struggling with this one guy. This guy is big. He's about, I'd say a good 6'6", about 240. And he's getting the better of me. I'm slipping and sliding on the floor. And here comes Bernie behind me, Lawrence of Arabia, and he pulls the shiv out. And he aims it at the guy.
Wow.
And the guy backed off. Mm-hmm. Or I might have been on the ground. I might have been victimized. I might have been impaired, or who, God only knows what this guy had on him. I didn't have any of the other guardian angels there at that moment. They were in other parts of Penn Station. So Bernie came to the rescue. He didn't hesitate. Like a true street guy. He just stepped into it, pulled out the shiv. He showed it. The guy said, back off. And this guy looked at Bernie like, oh, my God. Here he was, all swathed with a schmata on his head.
Curtis, you know what happened when he came? I said, Bernie, but what are you doing? You can't walk around a shiv. You're going to get arrested. I need you to show up. You got to show up the next morning. You can't walk around the streets with a shiv. He goes, I got to protect myself.
That's right. And by the way, we were the only people coming into the studio. You looked at all the competition. They were at home. They weren't coming into the studios. At WABC, the morning show was there. Sid was coming in on the subway, remember, the Upper West Side. Mm-hmm. Bernie was coming in from Long Island. I was coming in. Everybody was coming in and doing the show from the studio. The rest of the radio business, they were afraid. At that point, rightfully so, because people were dying. Every day they were dying. And we held it down. But Bernie, you didn't want to mess with Bernie. He was a man on a mission. And luckily for me, Bernie had my back that day. God only knows. That guy definitely would have been jamming and slamming me. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You know, one of the things that, like I said before, Bernie gave back, right? And one person that we do have to mention that is not part of the show right now with us is Jill Dietl, Validity Flipper. He spent time with her as well, and she supported him, and because I know that if Jill's out there, she'd want to make sure that she was part of this with him today. So thank you, Jill, for everything you've done.
She always would refer to Bernie, even in private, as Foxhole Bernie, because that's the kind of person he was, the kind of person you'd want to be in a foxhole with. By the way, a lot of people have been asking how can they send their well wishes either to the radio station or to Bernie's family. We've set up a comment box at WABCRadio.com that people can send their comments, their well wishes, whatever they want to send. You can go ahead and do that right now. And then a little later, one of the most listened to radio talk show hosts in the country, Mark Levin, he's going to be talking a bit about Bernie. He just put out a statement saying Bernie was the best, a great patriot and friend. He'll be badly missed. More later today on my radio show, R.I.P. brother. I think he's speaking for a lot of people when he puts out a statement like that. Sid Rosenberg brought a lot of people, a lot of very tough people to tears at the recent WABC gala. We have the entire video on our website. Here's a portion of Sid's remarks about Bernie when we were at the WABC gala.
First, before I give out this very prestigious award to a guy that was a hero of mine for many, many, many years, if you're a fan of the Bernie and Sid show, and all of you are, I know you are, we're number one, by the way, folks, number one, we're kicking ass all over New York. I'm starting to sound like Trump, Scott. If you listen to the show every day, you know it's a two-man team. I am Sid. But on most nights, before about 8 months ago, to my right would be standing Bernie. But I think all of you know that Bernie you're not doing very well these days.
Yesterday night, we were all alerted to the fact that with his family, Bernard had passed into the hereafter, high in the sky, radio heaven. He certainly earned his place there many times over. And so it's been a tremendous loss for us here at WABC, and I know our extended family of all the radio listeners who remember Bernie from his days with Imus in the Morning on television with O'Reilly, many other TV appearances, and of course when the Shidduch was made and he was brought together with Sid Rosenberg to finally do a show of their own, which they so rightfully deserved. And maybe Sid's most magnificent moment was recently at our 100th anniversary celebrating the birth of this station, WABC, WJZ, back in Newark so many years ago. John and Margo Catsimatidis, Chad Lopez, president of Red Apple Media, put together an extravaganza at Cipriani's on 42nd Street with close to 1,000 people seated. We went through the history. We honored so many of those who made WABC possible, both when we were spinning stacks of wax and then talk radio. And then Sid was presenting one of the awards, and you could see at that moment he was gripped in tremendous emotion, and he was honoring his partner who unfortunately was receiving chemo and struggling against prostate cancer, Bernard McGuire.
First, before I give out this very prestigious award to a guy that was a hero of mine for many, many, many years, if you're a fan of the Bernie and Sid show, and all of you are, I know you are, we're number one, by the way, folks, number one, we're kicking ass all over New York. I'm starting to sound like Trump, Scott. If you listen to the show every day, you know it's a two-man team. I am Sid. But on most nights, before about 8 months ago, to my right would be standing Bernie. But I think all of you know that Bernie you're not doing very well these days. And I started my fourth consecutive week this morning without him. And it has become pretty regular to do the Bernie and Sid in the morning show without Bernard. And we built this thing together. to become number one. It all started 6 years ago when I got the call from Chad Lopez in Boca Raton, Florida, that me and Bernie were going to team up and take back New York, and we did it, and we did it in a big way. So tonight, I ask everybody in this audience to say a prayer for my man Bernie. But before we do that, because this is a celebration, I want you to stand up as if he was right here and give my man Bernard McGuire a rousing round of applause. Everybody in this room. Thank you.
If you want to see the video of Sid's remarks and the standing ovation that he got, honestly, you couldn't hear a pin drop, even though it was a capacity crowd. We have the video at WABCRadio.com. A lot of people have been asking to see it. Certainly very emotional, even more so, seeing what happened.
Well, two things that stand out about Bernard McGuire with his passing is he stood up twice when nobody else would. First, the invasion of Iraq. He was called a traitor, a voice of treason, because he was one of the few to speak out and say, this is an abomination. We shouldn't be going to war against Iraq and Saddam Hussein. Now imagine, with Imus in the morning, with John McCain coming on as a regular guest, generals of all types, here it is. He stood out, the lone voice that we should not be invading Iraq. How many years later we realized that Bernard McGuire was right? I was wrong. I certainly was part of the, rally, as so many of the listeners out there who probably thought that Bernard McGuire had lost it all, was not being patriotic. He was right. And then what a lot of people don't know is that the opportunity for Bernard McGuire to have his show here at WABC with Sid Rosenberg was almost snatched away from him by Don Imus himself. Now imagine you're coming to work every day. You are the producer. You are holding it together while Don Imus is down in the ranch having his own struggles with his own health issues, screaming, he's hollering, he's like out of control at times, and Bernard McGuire had to keep the ship afloat, no mutiny on the Bounty. He had to be the voice of reason. He had to keep everyone together. He had to keep feeding information to Imus through his earpiece. He would read the books. He would feed Imus the questions that made Imus into the talk show host he was. And nobody was ever telling that story. Now, finally, Bernard McGuire had an opportunity for a mid-morning show. Right after the Imus in the Morning show, he was willing to do the Imus show, come on with Sid, and do the mid-morning show. And Imus said to the powers that be, no. I don't want him to have his own show. Now imagine, he had to stand up to Imus. People don't realize Imus was paying his salary. Imus could have just said, you're gone, you're fired, as he had wanted to do so many times before. And to his credit, Bernard McGuire stood up to him and said, no, it's my time. I've earned this opportunity. We got to bring Sid Rosenberg back. And how many times, Chad Lopez, did Imus say, no, I want my very dear friend Mike Lupica. Turned on his own. These were two guys, especially Bernard and Sid Rosenberg, who helped him become the talk show that he was, Imus in the Morning, both originally at the Fan and WABC. And yet Bernard McGuire continued to talk to all of us. He said, I want Sid Rosenberg up here. This is what I've always dreamed of. He said to me, Curtis, we got to fight for this. The odds, I mean, you could have filled up a room with all the people who did not want Sid Rosenberg to come up. You could have filled up the closet with all the people who wanted Sid Rosenberg to come up. This man here, Chad Lopez, I walked into his office. I came back from Hollywood, Florida, did a complete background check on Sid to make sure that he was free of all of the negative things that had haunted his life. I gave him the clean bill of health. He had the contract that said, Mike Lupica, Chad, you can't sign that. Minutes away. He was being pressured by Cumulus, by all the executives. Sign it. Chad put his own job on the line, his own career on the line. He said, this would not be good for the station. We're bringing Sid Rosenberg up. And it's exactly what Bernard McGuire want and what some of us fought for. But without Chad Lopez signing off on it, it would have been no deal. No deal.
And by the way, Tuesday, we're going to do a whole day worth of coverage looking at Bernie's incredible career on the radio, giving a lot of guests an opportunity who weren't with us today to be heard about their experiences with Bernie. And, Curtis and Chad, you know better than anybody, having worked in radio a long time, of the tremendous egos that can be in the radio business. Bernie really never was one. He never really seemed to, to seek the limelight. He was always happy for the show, the team, the station to do well, even if that meant he had to take a back seat and let somebody else shine. And I think that's really something that stands out about him more than a lot of other people that have achieved his level of success in radio.
You know, Frank, we said it earlier, right? Sid, extrovert. Bernie, introvert.
Yes.
Right? However, when Bernie sat in his seat, had the mic in front of him, the extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he shined, and that's where he shined even when he was out on the streets, because Bernie's just a good man, right? But when Bernie just had it on the mic, and he felt it, he connected with the audience, and he would say that, right? There would be a lot of times we would have events, and Bernie just wouldn't show up. Not because he was being disrespectful. It's not what he was about. Right? He felt comfortable with this mic, and that mic was powerful to him, and he did more. And he had said to me, sometimes we would go to events, Bernie, you got to come to me. He says, Chad, I could do much more on this mic than I can do standing in front of 100 people.
Well, to your point, I think it's actually a reflection of what I was alluding to, the lack of ego on Bernie's part. A lot of air talent at every radio station. If there's a station event, they're all there because they're terrified of not being political enough to keep their job. Bernie was never afraid of any of that stuff. He didn't have any interest in playing station politics or anything like that. He was interested in doing his job and taking care of his family, not being seen glad-handing or sucking up to whatever corporate CEO might have been in charge at the time. And I think that says a lot about the kind of person he was.
And his preparation, incredible, because he brought the sensibility of a producer to the program he did. He didn't program for himself. We all are guilty of sometimes programming our programs for what we like. He would program the program for what he knew the listeners wanted to hear, needed to hear. And he would spend all the time cutting up different cuts, going through different research that none of us would ever do. None of us would ever do. And he knew that most times 3/4 of it he wouldn't even use.
Yes.
But he wanted to be over-prepared because he was doing this for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So you are absolutely right, Chad. He might not have appeared at the public events because we loved it, because people would come up and kiss our tuchus, you're the best, the wonderful. He didn't need that. He was a workman.
Mm-hmm.
He knew his job was to put on the very best show he could possibly do. And he knew you couldn't just whip it up. Mm-hmm. You had to prepare. Nobody was better prepared than Bernard McGuire doing his show.
To your point, there'd be a lot of days we all share a lot of the same computers. There'd be some days where I would use the same computer that he would use right after him, and he'd leave his email up, and what you'd see was pages and pages of notes that he would email to himself the entire previous day. So he's a real guy that really never stopped working on the show. He never stopped prepping.
And he listened to the other programs here on WABC. How many talk show hosts and hostesses will remain nameless who do not listen to the program? We've had staff who doesn't listen to the program. He was immersed. He would be listening to me in the wee hours of the morning. He'd listen to you in the wee hours of the morning. He'd listen to Lydia. You heard Lydia say he heard her first program. He complimented her. He was embedded with WABC, and he was always there to help, especially the younger guys, younger gals. He mentored them into becoming the great talents that they are now behind the scenes, who maybe one day will be behind the microphones like you. You started as an intern, Frank. You started then as a producer, and then as a talk show host. Yes.
I am back. I just had breakfast with the Cardinal. The Cardinal is distraught that Bernie has passed. He just learned about it when I told him. And he looks forward to doing a Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral in honor of the memory of Bernie. And he was very emotional about it. And I was having breakfast with him, along with the Archbishop of America, Orthodox Elpidophoros, and the Patriarch of Africa. And thousands and thousands of children are dying in Africa from water, diseases. And we talked about how all our churches can work together to save thousands of lives. And again, I will be talking about it maybe during our 5 o'clock hour.
That's wonderful. That's great. That's great. Certainly, there's a lot of people praying for Bernie today, and he was a very devout Catholic and somebody that wore his faith very close to his heart and helped him get through some very tough times, I'm sure. And I think you're going to be hearing a lot about Bernie on the radio station the rest of the day. Tonight, I have some highlights of our conversations over the years that I really got a kick out of. It was incredible wit, an incredible intellect, and just an incredible guy, a guy that I learned a lot from.
And by having an open event at St. Patrick's Cathedral that the Cardinal will host, gives us an opportunity for all the listeners to come.
All the listeners. Don't forget, St. Patrick's has room for 5,000 people.
Yes.
And let them come from far and wide to honor Bernie that day, and let's show that Bernie is loved and respected.
And we're going to have a big tribute to him on the air on Tuesday. So people should definitely be tuning into the program on Tuesday. Absolutely, thoughts and prayers, especially to his wife Carol and to his children. Chad,
John, Frank, Curtis, thank you for doing today and last minute pulling this together. I would like to close it out with, on behalf of John, Margo, and Catsimatidis family and our WABC family, it is with profound sadness that I must share this news with Bernie's listeners and his loyal audience. Bernard McGuire, husband, father, and our friend passed away yesterday, October 4th, in the company of his family. Bernie courageously battled cancer for all to see and hear, in a matter that was inspiring to all of us. He graduated the College of Mount St. Vincent in the Riverdale section of the Bronx, and later went on to marry his beloved Carol and have 2 children, Brendan and Melanie. Bernie loved radio and shared his life with the listeners of New York City since 1986, when he joined the many voices on the New York City's airwaves. He entertained millions across the country, working with Imus in the morning, making you laugh one moment and making you think the next. He developed characters as the Cardinal and was a part of history, creating legendary moments on both radio and TV. In 2007, Bernie came with Imus to broadcast here at WABC. His personality from day one dramatically improved the camaraderie and morale of the entire radio station. His comedy, impressive. His professionalism, immeasurable. His character, without peer. In 2018, when it came time for Bernie and Sid to be WABC's morning show, Bernie once again succeeded and just this year has become the #1 radio news talk morning show in New York City. He will be missed by all that knew him and listened to him. A true gentleman. He is the fabric of the morning show. He is the morning show and was the backbone of this entire radio station. Our thoughts and prayers are with the McGuirk family, and Tuesday we will have a tribute show honoring the life of Bernard McGuire. But for now, we will take a moment of silence as we honor our colleague, our friend, and one of the most gifted radio personalities of all time, Bernard McGuire.